Hello everyone. Welcome to our channel. Don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell to receive updates on every new video I upload. Without further delay, let's dive straight into the video. On this channel, there is an announcement. I'm sorry in advance, guys, because this video has lots of grammar and spelling mistakes. I don't have that much time to correct grammar. If I have the time, I will definitely correct any grammar mistakes, but doing so will prevent me from making the next videos on this channel. I trust you understand my message, and I appreciate your overwhelming support for the previous videos on this channel. I want to clarify that from now on, I will definitely upload videos to this channel, if not every day, then at least one per week. Once again, I apologize in advance for any grammar and spelling errors you may have encountered on this channel. Please continue to support me and show your love for this channel. It was with great regret that Hiruzen Sarutobi took 2-year-old Naruto Uzumaki away from the orphanage for the last time. He had wanted the boy to have a normal life. Well, a normal childhood, but it seemed that his mistakes were the very cause of why he would not be. Or well, part of them announcing the fact that the boy was a Jinchuriki was their biggest mistake, thinking that a single law would be enough to allow the boy to live in blissful ignorance was their second, but the strangest thing was that they said their plans were doomed to failure from the beginning because the boy was not normal. Now anyone would say that the son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki could not be anything other than abnormal. They would be right, but even that would not be enough to conceive how abnormal the boy Naruto from 2 really was. Years he could not live in the orphanage because the caretakers hated him, but because everyone there feared him. Yusen on the other hand could not help but see the child the future shinobi as gifted. The boy had the unnatural talent of being able to feel every negative emotion directed at him. Oh no, he could barely speak, but the boy understood people much better than one with simple words. The Sundaime was grateful for this gift. He already saved the boy from attacks, but it was worrying because word had begun to spread about this talent. It started out quite simple. The child cried every time certain people came near. At first the reports only said that he was sensitive. It was not an understatement, but things changed when the child was able to walk. He walked everywhere. Innocent eyes watching the children would never notice, but some of the caregivers would. They had seen him lingering in the shadows in places a child should not be able to reach. He was a quiet child from the beginning, but when he began to speak, he had an idea that hit home. The shinobi children grew up and matured quickly, but Naruto was years away. In front of prodigies like Itachi and Kakashi, even Orochimaru, his sentences were short and too direct, but they were factually coherent and were delivered from the mouth of a child. Even now the observant eyes of the Union Namikaze Uzumaki were looking at him in silence. He could feel the gaze on him. His own face and could not help but look at the child in his arms. The appearance of Minato, the tenacity and intensity of Kushina, a perfect union of 2 first-level shinobi. He thought about the tragedy of the death of the children's parents and realized your mistake too late. You're sad because my parents died, you love them. The voice sounded unnatural coming from someone so young, and Sarutobi would have refused if he hadn't read the reports of the boys inside. I love everyone within the walls of Konoha, even at you. The boy's eyes blinked like a Kabuto, and he nodded. This was almost becoming too surreal for him. I'm sorry for scaring them. I won't go back there, right? Even now the boy had some perception of the consequences of actions. He understood the nuances of regret that Sarutobi had within himself and connected it to the feelings he had unmasked within the orphanage. The boy was 2 years old, and yet Hiruzen knew that he could bring countries to their knees. All he had to do was take the boy to a banquet, a harem, and watch as all his political schemes and intrigues fell around him. People are really that bad? The old Hokage sighed. The boy's innocence wouldn't last long. Or I'm young, but I'm growing up faster than normal. That's weird. The boy, he had no chance of having anything resembling a childhood. All Yen's plans regarding the boy would have to be scrapped. It was too dangerous to leave him alone. He had no choice but to raise the boy himself, to help him learn how to control this power of his. Would rarely be able to see the boy, but it was the best route to take. There were only all sorts of players who might try to take advantage of the boy. Danzo would only know. I don't like him either. It was going to be a grueling few years for Yusen Sarutobi and his new charge. Kurama noted that his host was taken to the office of the one the humans called Hokage. He remembered the man from the night of his liberation possession, nor later resealed. He was the second Hokage he had fought, and from what he remembered he was close to his last prison, his time inside Kushina. It was good, painful by design of the seal. He had not had much comfort in his tenure as his prisoner, nor did they speak as his second Jinchuriki. That seemed to become the trend. Everything seemed to go the same as his time within the myth Uzumaki Senju when Kushina became pregnant. She was not the first Jinchu and Kaiu and no Kitsune to get pregnant, so it wasn't really the first time Kurama experienced the full gestation of a newborn growing inside another living organism, but it was the first time he didn't. Being a chakra construct meant there was always a slight curiosity about the workings of the more organic life forms of the planet it inhabited when they were away. As the fetus slowly grew, he discovered That he could minutely manipulate with his chakra, and that brought him an evil joy he could devastate his prison for what she had done to him, but when he was about to realize that this new life, although human, had not committed sin in anything. It was the definition of innocent. His father's words echoed in his memories, and he could not find it within himself to destroy it. That had been an extreme blow to his enjoyment. He could not attack the growing organism, and part of his interest in it faded. Then a day boredom had grown so much that he inspected the baby again and identified a gene that led to a rather mediocre trait almost. Mechanically Kurama ordered his chakra to correct a wayward gene. It was only after the fact that Kurama realized that inadvertently he had helped a human. His disgust with himself led him to spend a few weeks doing nothing but thinking about all the ways humans were ethically weak and terrible, but the boy was none of those, at least not here where he couldn't be intimidated by those in the great world beyond, and it was that fact that caused Kurama to pause and think about his current situation. He knew that only the cursed clan of Uzumaki could contain him, but there was only a handful of them left in the world. There was no Senju with the throwing of wood. His container Kusina would not live forever. The boy was going to be next prison, whether the baby knew it or not. Kurama accepted this and did not reproach the boy for it. In fact, it was not his fault the state of the outside world. He was as much a victim as Kurama himself. That made him stop again. The child was going to be his prison. The child he could strengthen and magnify for no reason would be his prison. He had an opportunity before him. He could shape it so that the child would be strong. The boy became wise that the boy would be above the depraved people around him. He could enhance him so that he could sense the evils around him. Of course, none of these powers could be at their maximum until it was sealed into the boy, but he could lay the foundation for his mandate at this time, so he set to work. He would make his next vessel worthy. He would give the boy a great advantage over any human companion. Shinoi no Kurama's work increased when he began to wait for the day he could speak with the child, in which he had had as much involvement as the child's own mother. At first he wanted to form a more suitable and comfortable prison, but towards the end, Kurama had realized that he had become affectionate with the baby, and the day was approaching every again to the day of his birth, and what a catastrophe had been sealed inside the child within Naruto the same day of his birth was a blessing for Kurama, but he knew it would be a tragedy for the child it took him. A day to get used to his new prison, the work of the damned Yondaime slowing down his work even more, but now he had nothing but the best intentions towards the boy and was helping in the function of the seal, so that he would not be stopped. The foundations that he had laid were immediately acted upon and built upon them. The boy would know everyone. The evils of man are a monumental burden for any normal human, but he would need it. He needed to have it to understand Kurama, to know that K's rage was justified but not infinite, that his hatred was born from fear, frustration, and regret. That was the only way to do it. For the boy to understand the only way to ensure that his prison would be a friend while being summoned to his Kage's office was not a new pastime. Unfortunately, it was still one he was struggling to get used to. His sensei's office was still the same. Some of his portraits and memories were still in their places, but it was no longer his. It was once again his predecessor's, the Sundaime. As with every loss of a precious person in his life, Kakashi had taken it very hard after all the progress. What he had done when dealing with the loss of Rin and Obito, losing his sense and his father figure and not being able to stop him was terrible. He had rushed back to Anbu, quickly reaching his captain rank and taking on mission after mission for 2 years. Yuzin had understood. Approved but nonetheless allowed him to cope in his own way. That's why today out of nowhere a stranger came. Something about it was making his stomach twist uncomfortably, and he didn't know what jumped over the windowsill and came face to face with the Minato. Kakashi's blue eyes stopped in his tracks and did not pee. He couldn't help but look at the blonde hair and the innocently inquisitive look that looked back at him, and he thought of Minato, his leader. Master, father, you miss your father? My father. Kakashi's blood ran cold and surprise kept his instincts to walk away at bay. The boy Naruto, who more could be, he was still looking at him, apparently staring at his soul. He was so restless that he couldn't even decide if the boy could or not. You have lost many friends, a lot of family. I lost my family too. I am sad too. I don't blame you. Nice. And Kakashi still couldn't say nothing. Well, the boy told the truths that he tried so hard to hide. Was this his punishment for failing? The boy to have all his failures exposed so that a judgment could be passed on them. He had not forgotten the boy. He had only felt so guilty, so fractured, so broken he couldn't have raised the child. He wasn't his father. No one could replace his father, and it was his fault. No, it's not your fault. Nice. And however, I forgive you. I think you're kind. You're a good person. It was at that point in the one-sided verbal conversation Kakashi's instincts kicked in, and he looked around. Besides the fun and aim, they were alone. Well, the boy was letting out secrets that even he shouldn't have known. He would have to be taught to be quieter. He wasn't a child anymore. He was 2 years old. Kakashi. He hadn't been doing missions for so long. He took the boy in his arms and looked at him, making sure his sensei's son was okay. He gently turned him from side to side looking at him. He couldn't see anything wrong with the boy. He lifted his headband and he looked at the boy laughing once again with his death Sharingan. He seemed to be fine. That is an incredible gift. The boy stretched out his arms and kept his face still so he could look at the eye. Kakashi didn't know what was more disturbing, if the boy talking about that so young way or knowing things without being told. He looked at him and the old monkey smiled softly at him and gestured for him to sit. Naruto, here Kakashi, they will no longer live in the orphanage. The silver-haired man nodded silently as he sat down holding Naruto in his lap. The boy couldn't stay there. Something was wrong or different with him, and they would have to find out. That sensei left something to hint at what the cause could be. The Hokage shook his head. I'm afraid we don't really know what caused it. This and our dear Naruto-kun may have to do with his tenant or not. Both men turned pale at their thoughts. Something you are afraid of is inside me. Well, Kakashi Itachi had learned many things, but how to censor his subconscious train of thought was not one of them. Not even his Sharingan could help him with that. Gods forbid. If he started thinking about the clandestine operations that the Samba were so happy to carry out, Naruto's face scrunched up as if he had tasted something bitter, and Kakashi couldn't even fake a look. Innocent while Yusin looked at him coldly. This would definitely take some getting used to. The Hokage's side as he pinched the bridge of his nose. I will take care of the child. I will need your support and assistance. What'll I do? Congratulations on your promotion. Ah, so that was the plan. Yes, Kakashi being the Anbu commander wouldn't be out on missions as often, and he could spend some time taking care of the child when the Hokage couldn't do it either. The plan was good, but surely there would be times when neither of them could take care of the child, and when we're both busy. Hokage-sama, his question made Naruto also look at the Hokage, curiously knowing that his answer would be the identity of someone new that Naruto would meet. I have some ideas. Naruto stuck out his tongue suddenly and made a gagging sound. He doesn't jijji. It doesn't seem like a good person. Kakashi, like Sarutobi and Naruto, seemed to have an argument about supervisors and extra caretakers. The boy was incredibly scary. Even the boy, if you could call him a boy, was more than complete. He could be a Kiki Henkai, but he wasn't from Uzumaki. Minato was always perceptive, but not even he was as clever as the boy did it. 1,000 theories bounced around in Kakashi's head, and they all led to the same conclusion. Naruto Uzumaki was special, the 2-year-old boy sitting at Sandame's desk talking, completely oblivious to the surreal. The moment was precious. It had to be protected. Kakashi had few friends and no family. At least that was what his guilt had convinced him. He had not deserved to approach the boy. It would only bring tragedy. He knew better. Now the boy needed security, and he needed guidance. Maybe Kakashi may not have been as old as the Hokage, but at that time he was an expert shinobi. The boy needed to be surrounded by those who could take care of him. It was funny that it was Naruto's words that made Kakashi realize of this. He also needed the boy. They were family. Minato was a father to both of them in different ways. Kakashi had a purpose again. He would teach and nurture his sensei's legacy. A warmth blossomed in his chest, and he smiled when Naruto began to laugh. When Yusin once more, he accidentally thought of a state secret. Kakashi, could you take Naruto to my house and take care of him for the rest of the Hokage-sama? Naruto turned to him with his arms outstretched, and Kakashi carried him. The hands that had killed thousands of men quite easily. They cautiously picked up the boy and hugged him. He may have been gone from the boy's life until now, but that would change. Even if he couldn't be there constantly, he would always protect him. That's what older brothers do. Not Naruto's eyes. They opened and he looked around in amazement. This wasn't the room his new older brother had almost left him in. No, this was some kind of dark and damp place. A dark and damp place. Naruto stood up slowly and shook the water off of himself. His back didn't feel good. It made him feel uncomfortable. The dark and damp place was also cold. However, that was a man too long. The dark, damp and cold place. The place is not good. Well, that was good. He took his first steps in the bad place, and he realized that it was long. There was no door in sight, and Naruto was starting to get scared. He slowly walked down the hallway and became more anxious as he went. After a long time he came to a large room where there was a large door. Beyond the door there was something that was very big. 2 big eyes. They opened in the dark and looked at them with curiosity. Most of the children would have been scared, or at least unsure of the nature of such a being, but Naruto could feel it. There were many bad feelings that the animal had. A lot too much for Naruto to point out, but there was only a bad feeling directed at Naruto. Fear of being alone. Hello Naruto. Naruto blinked in surprise and took a few steps closer. Timidly he looked closer and saw more details of the great beast as he was slowly crawling towards the light. Hello, how do you know my name? I was there when your parents named you. The boy's face widened in surprise and he took a few more steps forward. You also knew my parents? They were friends. No, they didn't like the boy already. He wasn't as exuberant and slowly shrunk back into himself, but still got closer. What's your name? Are you what Hijiki-an were scared of? Yes, I'm the Kyuubi no Kitsune. That's a long name. Kurama looked at the boy still without making any judgment. Things really looked good. This had been the longest and most civilized conversation he had ever had with another human being besides his father. It's a title. A name that people call me. My real name is Kurama. The boy nodded instantly, oblivious to the importance of the moment. This was Kurama's first to trust a human for the first time in his life. The boy may be taking it as if it were simply a new encounter, but Kurama himself was about to establish a bond with another, a friendship. Why are you here, Kurama? This place doesn't look very nice. I'm trapped inside a seal. Naruto-kun, inside you. This is the manifestation of the seal. I can exchange it for something better. Big Fox blinked. He wasn't used to this. A big part of him was still hoping that he would be manipulated or taken advantage of him. It was pleasant, refreshing. Certainly you can think and wish that the seal changes. If that's what you want, well, this is your house. Don't you like it like that? Kurama smiled toothily and shook his head. No, Naruto-kun, I'm not amused by this sewer in which we found sewer. So that was the shortest name for a dark and golden wet place. Naruto found himself nodding his head. He didn't like the sewer either, but he didn't like the orphanage either, and he doubted Kurama would like it. Kurama was too big for houses of people, and he was a fox, so maybe a park. His surroundings rumbled and moved. A large expanse of green grass and trees surrounded the two of them. In the distance there were mountains, all of which had their own monuments or kahe. But it was impressive to look at the imagination of a 2-year-old. The boy was still learning about the world around him. Apparently that was fine. Kurama could deal with having to look at the faces of 4 humans honestly. After Naruto left, he might enjoy shooting a bijadama little to 1 or 2 of the monuments. Suddenly, Kurama felt Naruto get on one of his legs and almost threw him out of shock. As it were, he jerked up slightly and Naruto laughed as if the biju had done it to amuse him. This he didn't could have foreseen this. The boy was lying on his fur with his eyes closed and seemed to be almost purring in satisfaction. I know you were scared. Don't be. I would love to be your friend. Kurama couldn't even respond. He didn't know what to say. He just looked at the boy for a second and then he closed his eyes and lowered his head. He felt the boy curl up his neck and let himself fall to lie on his head. After all, he could get used to this. In the 2 years that Naruto Uzumaki had made his home in the Sarutobi clan compound, there always seemed to be something going on, whether other Sarutobi members were talking to him about his young charge walking around the grounds in the dead of night, seemingly talking to himself, with the boy walking up to other members out of nowhere and talking to them about his fears and pain. Just as things were starting to calm down, the boy had taken the trouble to start wandering around village. There were quite a few occasions where concerned civilians took the boy to the Hokage tower after seeing him wandering alone on the other side of the village after the 3rd such incident, and realizing that Naruto simply wouldn't be listening to their orders immediately, he had decided that it was necessary for an Anbu squad to always be protecting the boy. It was necessary. It was a protection of a future asset and a vital player in the village. Naruto would grow up and change things. Of course, he knew he couldn't be constantly separated from the guard, but the Anbu commander joined in from time to time. The honor usually fell to Catweasel Boar. It was fun to hear their first report, as the boy always seemed to sense their presence and would look for them after a few hours of them constantly moving and almost dancing outside his sight. The boy seemed to pause, as if he realized that they could not be within his sight due to his work, and he never looked at them again. Of course, the group knew that he was aware of their presence from the warnings he gave unconsciously. Irritating to all of them, Weasel, especially since his skills meant nothing to evade the boy. Yuzin realized that the boy was a perfect exercise for the new Anbu recruits. It quickly became a normal routine for the trainees to take charge of protecting him and staying outside from their sight. They always wondered why the exercise didn't fail immediately after they got caught. Once they quickly learned that the boy was too good, he seemed to recognize people after a couple of times of being around them, but was always wary of new ones. Remedial presences. Naruto W quickly became an informal punishment, of course, for the 3 regularly scheduled to protect him. He honed his skills. The 3 couldn't understand how the boy did it, and Yuzin had no intention of telling him, to be honest. He also found himself testing how close could be before Naruto noticed. It seemed like speed was his biggest help in evading the boy's senses, but even that wasn't perfect. The boy may have matured quickly, but he was still a child. He didn't have the knowledge, the experience, or the skills to be a real threat to any shinobi above honing rank. That was until he realized that Naruto was using these practices and times to train. It would take an experienced eye to notice, but the boy's reflexes were growing, as was his honing rank. Perception was 3 years old at the time and had already begun training. That prompted him to sit down and teach Naruto the basics of chakra and its use, only to be told that his friend had already told him. Fearing the worst, he had almost interrogated the before discovering the true identity of his friend, the Kino Kitsune. That had been quite an argument. In the end, he could not sway the boy, and he found himself powerless to deny that the boy really had a much greater insight into the character of a person or being than he did. This conversation also cemented that it was the kilo that granted Naruto this empathy. He had heard reports of Jinchuriki taking various Subu patron styles and gifts, but those always seemed to be more ninjutsu oriented. This was on a whole new level. Let the Kyuubi give him to his host, without realizing what could be the greatest gift among the nine-tailed beasts, and so he began to train the boy at the young age of 3, the youngest to train in Konoha since its founding. He led the boy through his lectures on the shinobi world and the theory of chakra and jutsu. The boy absorbed it all. His chakra reserves were minuscule, his body was weak, but his mind and senses were abnormally advanced. The boy began to train with a vigor that reminded him of his old Genin team. The Sannin was always training. After a few months it was brought to his attention that the boy had tied Weasel to train with him. Apparently Naruto forced him to help him. After hours of constantly making Weasel give his senses, Weasel became his Sina, and with a vicious fervor as revenge for being used like that by the boy, Yuzin decided to let them solve it themselves. It was good for Naruto to have another role model, and it was good for Itachi to have some kind of social interaction. That was the difference between prodigies like Itachi and Kakashi. Naruto was becoming more and more outspoken and optimistic. Kushina's personality was starting to appear from time to time within the boy, but he still operated mainly under Minato's calm and analytical demeanor. After 6 months of training, the 4-year-old had become a shinobi, an inexperienced and amateur shinobi, but one anyway his age. It was the only thing that he had not learned any jutsu, at least none of his human teachers. But he had been beginning to practice the Interceptor Uchiha-style tests according to Weasel's request. It seemed that Naruto's senpai had taken a supreme interest in his career and was not above him. Ignore some clan laws to help him in the time he could spare. Yuzin had also initiated the boy into the path of the monkey claw style, and the Utsu. In truth, the Hokage found himself pleased to instruct such a willing student and found himself beginning to lecturing on the basics of jutsu creation. Without realizing how advanced a subject it was, the boy was progressing very well, and Sarutobi found himself allowing him to sit in diplomatic meetings here and there, dismissing the boy as if he were just a child, and that was a serious mistake. That was what led to this meeting between Hiruzen and the ambassador of Kumagakure. A treaty had been reached, signed and officiated. All that was left was to discuss the plans between the two villages and organize a celebration, send the ambassador back the Kumo with the good news, and they were on their way to having an alliance with another hidden village. Hiruzen was not naive, but if a tangible peace treaty could be achieved by 3 of the 5 great nations, it would be the first true step towards realizing the dream of Shodaime of peace and global unity. Did distrust the treaty, but was also allowing them the benefit of the doubt. It may not be the yellow flash, but it would not be remiss to remind Kumo why they called him the god of shinobi. In the corner of the room, Naruto sat down silently, watching the meeting continue with half-closed eyes. The man from Kumo was a good man, but he had something planned that would hurt someone within and as a Gakure shinobi, Naruto would not let him carry out his plan. Naruto watched silently as the Kumagakure ambassador radiated with a suppressed intent to hurt Hiruzen Jiji. His Hokage had told him about proper diplomatic etiquette. To allow the young Uzumaki to listen to such proceedings, it was presumptuous. To interrupt or act would be unseemly and embarrassing to the Hokage. He had to be on his best behavior. If he sensed something that was important but not critical, he was supposed to wait until after the meeting to inform Hiruzen Jiji. If it was critical, he was supposed to point out Anbu in the room. What was he currently doing? Yawning and stretching his arms out to his sides, and then back, and then looking out the window with a sigh that would trigger a wide sweep of the room and surroundings of the Hokage Tower. After Naruto foiled an assassination attempt on Hyuga by preemptively exposing the assassin, word spread in Anbu headquarters that the Lockage district, the Jinchuriki, could become quite a useful tool for the security of the village, as well as for protecting his Kage. Sarutobi had watched in amusement for almost a week as In and Weasel Senpai and Naruto had established a way complex code in his office. The boy treated him as professionally as ever, but seemed to enjoy trying to think of subtle cues that others would ignore, as if making his own secret code was a game. Although it is true that many shinobi children played similar games, it was an experience unique seeing a child create such a versatile and useful code, one that the veteran Anbu would learn with the same fervor as always, but seeing them prove themselves and try to decipher every move the boy made the old man happy. Naruto would not have a normal childhood, but he was glad that he was happy, or seemed to be at least. After alerting Anbu, Naruto slowly approached the Hokage and simply tugged on his sleeve twice. There, with his work done, Naruto relaxed and tuned out the conversation. Now there was only one thing that what he could do was try to interpret the man's intentions. He closed his eyes and acted like the sleeping child had to concentrate. Kurama had spent time with him to hone his senses, and even now he could feel the Byulu watching him from the seal. Although the fox said nothing, knowing that he wanted to find out for himself he could do this, the man was arrogant. He could feel his presumption and smugness slowly coming out of him in bitter waves. The man hated Konoha that was hidden deep inside right now. He hated the shinobi clans, he hated them for taking his younger brother's life. Yes, the regret of having failed his brother in some way that led to his end was there, and that self-hatred deeply fueled his hatred for Konoha. The man suffered constant pain, not unlike Kakashi, but he wanted revenge. The hatred did not drive Kakashi, but it drove this man his trust in himself and his hatred for the clans, the shinobi clans, the gifted shinobi clans. The Kumagakure clans lacked Kik and Henkai and had more kidnapping attempts on foreign shinobi than any other hidden village. Hiruzen Jiji had told him that in his lessons not long ago. Of a month. If that was the case, then this could be another kidnapping attempt. It would be a good opportunity to try to steal a Kohen bloodline on the eve of negotiating peace between the two nations. Konoha had been preaching peace between the shinobi nations since last shinobi war, but which clan would be the victim? He doubted that he was the target. Jiji had told him how Kumagakure was about to kidnap his mother decades before, and only his father saved her, so the target could have been himself. But the man he had no intention towards him. It was not another clan. The most logical targets would be the Uchiha Yamanaka or the Hyuga. Naruto nodded slowly before stopping. He had a role to play and he could not allow the ambassador to realize that he had been created. He intended to doze off until that the meeting had concluded. It was then that he would tell his Hokage the secrets that he had learned. He could feel the pride that Kurama was sending towards him from the seal, and he almost smiled. He was happy to be useful to the village, and his Jiji would make sure that the plans. Hiruzen sighed and rubbed his temples. The room had been cleared and Naruto sat in front of his desk, and Kakashi and Itachi were on both sides. The news was not favorable. Honestly, he was very sad and also frustrated because his wish of peace was being taken advantage of once again by a fellow Kage. Thank the gods, otherwise he wouldn't have suspected until it was too late. Why didn't we arrest him, Jiji? Because he hasn't committed any crime so far, Naruto. If we arrest him for thinking and committing a crime, well, that wouldn't look good to Kumo. The boy blinked and nodded his head in agreement. He was young, and some of his naivety was still taking over, but he was learning much faster than anticipated. Getting back to the matter at hand, they had to be careful. They had Anbu following the Kumo representatives, but they did not know who the target was or when they would attack. It was also imperative to ensure that Anbu's additional detail was not discovered. The thousands of variables surrounding the situation made the old shinobi really want that his successor could have been here in his place, but he wasn't, and it was up to him to keep his village safe, to defend the will of fire. He had to stop when he saw Naruto's face sadden, as he remembered his father. Hiruzen strengthened his resolve. He would protect the families of Konoha, if only so that no other child would feel the pain that a revitalized Naruto felt. Yusen stood up from his seat abruptly. It was a sign of the severity of the action that the three shinobi and one child instantly silenced. And subconsciously they calmed down to receive orders and to alert the clan heads. Send a squad to each compound of the Weasel clan. Take Naruto to my compound and protect it. Kakashi did not waste a single moment and went to carry out his orders and protect the village for which his family he gave his life. He paused as he sensed the hesitation in both Naruto and Itachi to sit on the sidelines. Jiji, then help. I can sense when he is going to make his move. Itachi said nothing. If anyone could dissuade Yuzen from his last order, it would be the boy of 4 years. That I could sense any lie or malicious secret. I could read a Sona better than even the Hokage himself. I will not risk your safety in such an operation. This is non-negotiable. Go away, Weasel. Now Naruto opened his mouth to continue his argument, but Itachi heard the steel beneath of the order and knew that it was not Eren. Naruto. Jiji speaking was the professor, the god of shinobi. Itachi did not dare to anger his leader and quickly left with the boy in the middle of the refutation. Sarutobi sighed once more and left for the silence of his office. He didn't know the exact moment, but he had gotten so old he could feel it now. He was still as strong as the best of any jounin, but he could feel the weakness in his bones and the pain in his bones. His joints. His mind felt as young as ever, but his body revealed itself with every direction. His dreams were still as vibrant as ever of a world where children do not need to train to kill. What he would give to bring peace to these insignificant and quarrelsome nations. Every day he was less optimistic. He had actually thought that the Yondaime Raikage had changed his mind. How foolish of him. The happy ways of Kumagakure seemed to be in full effect. Even now he groaned as he realized how long Danzo was going to hold this latest development over his head. No. He would be surprised if his root agents were waiting in the shadows to take advantage of the situation. That thought brought him back to the present. He was losing himself in the stress of the moment. He needed to protect his village. He may have become softer and weaker in his old age, but no. He was less protective of those he served, and his judgment would be as cold and quick as the kunal he had used to end the life of Konohagakure's enemy, that was for sure. Naruto sat silently while Senpai remained silent, his vigil over the young man. Absolutely anyone else observing the young teenager would not infer anything scary, and if they could see his face under the mask, they would find that the mask was more expressive, but for Naruto this was the most troublesome thing his caretaker and mentor had ever had: anxiety, worry, anger, regret, fear that the Uchiha would be the target that would steal his brother while he was protecting Naruto, the realization that he was preventing Wheel Senpai from helping his family hurt Naruto. He didn't want to be a burden to anyone, especially someone who really cared about him and was kind to him, felt every fear that he usually had, and it almost overwhelmed him. His fear for his brother, for his family was suffocating Uzumaki to such a degree that he was beginning to panic. Fear of loss, hatred of himself, anger at his helplessness. The Uchi felt everything much more than normal people. It must be the curse of hatred. Kurama-san liked to go on and on about the Uchiha and their bleeding hearts and corrupted eyes. Weasel Senpai must have been a very strong Uchiha if he felt emotion so deep the way things were. Naruto didn't like his friend and senpai feeling that way, but his senpai knew him well. He couldn't convince him to go with him to stalk the Weasel ambassador. Senpai wouldn't allow himself to be manipulated into escorting Naruto against from a direct order from Lockage, but what could he do? Naruto could still sense the ambassador and could tell that he was getting close to his point of action. He wanted to need to stop him himself. He wanted to show everyone that he could be a shinobi that could save them like they saved him, and they took care of him. So he had to think. He couldn't convince Weasel Senpai with logic, but he could use his fears against him. It was a simple idea and a basic tool of any shinobi, but it was one that made Naruto hesitate to use it against his ally, his friend. But what choice did he have? If he wanted to prove that he was annoying, he had to act like one, even when it made him feel bad. Weasel Senpai is moving well. He had his senpai's attention. Time to bait the bait that the Uchiha is going after Sasuke. Uchiha the Anbu are being distracted. Naruto had never lied to Yusin Kashio. Itachi had never lied to any of his precious people, so when the senpai immediately jumped out of the nearby window, Naruto didn't feel pride, but guilt. Overwhelming guilt. Will get over it, boy. If you want to act, you better be careful. Naruto nodded. He nodded in agreement and left. He made his way across the rooftops, effortlessly evading all the Anbu patrols. He would make his Hokage proud, he would make Kakin proud, and he would find some way to apologize to senpai. Maybe buy him a box of his favorite poke. Well, ask Kakashi to lend him the money to buy the poke. If he couldn't convince Jiji to consider this as his first mission, he would probably have to think of a way to apologize to the three of them after tonight. Therefore Naruto's mind was consumed with what he was going to say as he followed the Kumo ambassador towards the compound and Hyuga. Maybe this wasn't the best idea. Itachi had crossed the village faster than ever, and a minute after arriving at the compound of his clan burst into his younger brother's room through the windows, with his sword drawn and the Sharingan moving wildly around the room. His entrance made his brother woke up with a scared scream, and it wasn't long before his parents came and ready to attack Itachi. Before he realized who Fugaku was, sheathed his kuna and narrowed his eyes. Itachi-kun, what are you thinking? The Kumo ambassador, whereas Fugaku's eyes hardened and he growled. Then he's pointing at fool. Itachi ignored his father for the moment and tried to find something out of place, some sense of the ambassador's chakra. It could be that Itachi had arrived early, but that was absurd. Naruto had been quite alarmed, and it would not have been so serious if the situation did not require it. At least the boy had not done it before. As he had a moment to calm down, Itachi began to have a sick feeling in his stomach. Father, take care of Sasuke. I will go talk to the else outside the compound. The Uchiha patriarch nodded. The tacit agreement that Itachi's best course of action was to consult with the Anbu was clear as Mikoto sat on Sasuke's bed to comfort the young Uchiha. Itachi left the way he had come after returning to put on his mask. He went to the nearest squadron and landed next to his captain Urson. The suspect has been detained. Upon entering the Uchiha complex, the captain shook his head. No, Commodore Jason, there have been no sightings or alerts. What made you think that the ambassador would come here? Naruto-kun informed me that he sensed the man was behind Sasuke-kun. The tiger mask nodded once in understanding. We will do another sweep of the complex boundaries and call in a squad to protect the objective. With another nod, Tiger and his squad they left to do their duty, and Itachi's worry only increased. If the ambassador wasn't here ready, then he wouldn't have come here, and if he hadn't been coming here, then Itachi Uchiha had been tricked by a 4-year-old boy who used his quirk to masterfully manipulate him. He didn't know if he was more proud of the boy or furious as he ran back to the Sarutobi clan compound. He only hoped that the boy had rethought his plan and returned to the compound, otherwise Itachi was going to be in trouble with the cashier, and that if the boy was not hurt when he tried to save the day. Naruto heard Kurama's ions and obeyed them diligently. He could fool anyone in the world, but he couldn't lie to Kurama. They were too intertwined to fool the other, and that was the way Kurama he seemed to like it. So he had to promise to listen to Fox's orders if he wanted his support in foiling the Kumo ambassador's plot. Naruto was well versed in the application of chakra, but he was young. He had no shortage of potential reserves from which to draw his chakra coils. They were weak and they were still developing even with the manipulation of the Kiri. His body was still too young to be a threat to a fully trained shinobi, at least his body alone. His body had also been persuaded to become a perfect vessel as a Jinchuriki. His body was the most strong that a human could be naturally, and his affinity for housing and channeling the Biju's chakra was unmatched in shinobi history at the moment. If he made a perfect bond with Kerr and fought in tandem, he could maintain the full chakra cloak for about 5 minutes, but the seal was closed. The two had discovered that there was a key to the seal recently in their attempts to decipher the Shiki Fujin until they found some way to obtain the key or unlock it through Fuinjutsu Gan. If that were possible, Kurama could only imperfectly flooding One Tail's chakra safely into the 4-year-old. That would give him 30 seconds of use before it began to affect his body. If he allowed Kurama's control, would be enough of a leap to have over the unsuspecting Kumon, and quickly he darted into the shadows of an alley when his target passed beneath him in the sewers. An interesting choice of movement and quite risky in fact. He regularly patrolled the underground tunnels, and if he was caught there were not many means of escape, and unless he was extremely clever, Earthyatsu, digging a tunnel would be a 50-50th shot at best. The only time I would go into the sewers of an enemy village on such a mission would be if I had acquired the Anbu patrol schedules. However, that was worrying Enver even more, as Naruto could sense that there was no Anbu close to intercept the ambassador. This was really bad, really bad. Maybe he should have found some way to convince Itachi to come with him. Thinking about his senpai made Naruto nervous, because a completely different reason. Naruto silently nodded his head and focused on the task at hand. He couldn't worry about the repercussions. He had to accomplish his mission, and he had to be a shinobi. If he was stupid, then Jiji senpai and Kakashi would be mad at him, and just feeling his disappointment and frustration, the thought made him shudder. He hated it when those he loved felt those emotions towards him, so he would do it so they wouldn't have to. He would do his job perfectly, and they couldn't get angry. His renewed vigor, he followed the shinobi through the village. It wasn't long before he began to believe he knew his destiny. The Hyuga complex. Then Kumagakure was behind the Byakugan. He stood still on the other side of the street of the complex. While the ambassador came out of the sewer at the end of the block, he looked around the corner of the building but couldn't see anything where he knew he was. The man seemed quite skilled in infiltration. Big surprise, he realized. Naruto shook his head, and using his minimum amount of chakra, he scaled the wall. He noticed that there was indeed an Anbu patrol, but they were sedentary, alert, but not moving. How could they not feel the Kumon was gone? At least Naruto couldn't feel it at all. How was that possible? He could feel his emotions, but they were confused, and it was difficult to pinpoint exactly where they were. It was like his brain no longer knew how to process his empathy. Genjutsu, Naruto groaned, and Kurama quickly interrupted his chakra system with a start. Naruto realized that there was an extremely light humming sound in the back of his elegant hearing, a hearing-based Genjutsu, one that would not immediately alert the clan with eyes that can see. Incredibly intelligent chakra. They had actually planned this mission well, better than they would have if they had wanted to kidnap a Gakuryukon citizen, and Naruto had something what to say about it. The little boy quickly threw himself into the branches of a tree hanging over his perch and silently maneuvered from one branch to another, making sure to stay within a certain range of his target, as Jiji had taught him how to walk through trees from the beginning to help him in his learning of the monkey claw style. The style was most useful when the practitioner of the style was in the middle of the branches of a tree. It gave the child a sense of belonging in the middle of the treetops of his home and made it more lethal when he acted within the forests of Inokuni. To tell the truth, Naruto had taken quite a liking to the style, partly because he wanted to emulate one of the most precious and important people in his life, and also partly because the maneuverability that the style caused, where the Uchiha interceptor katas were fast, was rigid when defending. The Uchiha clan elites were the most dangerous when they were stationary and had a clear range of vision. Their Sharingan gave them enough time to plan the next move of their opponents, and space gave them enough time to react to any incoming threats. The style was based on being able to counter attacks quickly, while also allowing the shinobi to switch to launch a jutsu at any time. It was also perfect for countering incoming friends towards Yuan Mas without the benefit of the Sharingan. Although the style became almost useless, it was only Naruto's ability that allowed him to save everything he could by twisting the style and perverting it to match his sensory power. However, that alone would not be enough for him. It was the addition of the Demon Claw style that would give the boy the advantage he needed against the enemies that would normally overwhelm him. This is what Queen Senai had told him many times. Of course, they had meant in the future when he was a renowned shinobi. However, it was his understanding of the monkey claw style that really allowed the boy not to arouse the suspicions of his prey. The infiltrator had managed to make his way without them. Hyuga were seen until he stood in front of a bedroom door. Naruto had to hold back until just after the man enacted as his plan. He was in front of a Hunin. He wasn't even a Genin, yet he couldn't fail here. There was too much at stake. He had to getting it right. The man walked into the room and grabbed a sleeping girl, trapping him. She couldn't resist. This was the moment Naruto hid. He threw his Training kunai at the man, making sure to throw two others into interception paths on the two routes of most likely evasion. The would-be kidnapper dodged out of the way at the last second, easily evading the ensuing kunai and throwing two shuriken at Naruto's initial position. Naruto watched him passively from below his original position, remaining calm as adrenaline coursed through his veins, and the enemy shuriken was flying over him. The boy knew how risky his current situation was, and he knew the risk and what it could cost him. He would not be hasty. He would prove that the lessons he had been taught had not been in vain. He would act as a shin, would the Kummuning could not leave any witness alive, and every second he was prevented from obtaining the package and retreating severely increased the chance of detection and failure of the mission. He would have to deal with Naruto quickly, so he let the ninja come to him. So he waited. He didn't have to do it for long. The man appeared blurry in his line of sight, and he was so when Kurama flooded Naruto with his chakra. Naruto could taste the fear that suddenly filled his enemy. After all, he was a Kumagakure shinobi, he probably knew. But Byulu chakra felt like better than any con known, and that hesitation was what allowed Naruto to attack. Naruto moved faster than ever and used his enemy's movements against him to spin and grab the bag before pushing off with his feet. Sent him and the young girl safely up to the roof while pushing the infiltrator forward. Naruto frowned as the cloak of a tail dissipated, but then blinked and sighed in relief. The enemy ninja quickly turned around, only to stare at the Byakugan in flames of Hyuga itself. The situation became more serious when 10 other members of the clan advanced from the shadows, all in the gentle fist stand surrendering. Yashi's voice was as calm as ever, but Naruto was sickened by the emotions contained beneath. Naruto almost jumped when he felt a hand land on his shoulder and turned to see an identical but less enraged version of Yashi. The man's eyes widened in surprise after finally realizing who Uzumaki's was. Naruto smiled shyly, and that feeling nausea only grew when an Anbu squad materialized on the same rooftop. He paled as he stared at the emotionless mask of a weasel as the girl he had rescued was taken out of the bag and placed in Luga's arms. Naruto almost wished he could control his quirk. That way he wouldn't be able to feel his senpai's disappointment and anger, and what's worse, his fears as to the condition he would find Naruto in. Excuse me, Ieyasu-san, my squad will escort the prisoner to Ibiki-san, but the Hokage wishes to see Naruto-san immediately. The Hyuga nodded and looked at Naruto sympathetically, and the boy could only swallow as they walked away. Naruto sighed sadly as he slowly copied the excerpt of the dangers of fighting a superior opponent from the ninja guide. For the 50th time he was at hand. Half of the second half of his punishment, and he couldn't decide which half was worse, having to look Jiji Itachi Senpai and Kakashi Yasin in the eyes and endure the bitter waves of disappointment that welled up from them as he gave his reporter the menial task. Without sense that was assigned to him. Even now he could sense Sarutobi Jiji and Olo from time to time from his desk. He was put out of his misery by the sound of a knock on the door. Yuzin barely had time to call them in before taking the ceremonial position from a lower-ranking observation guardian. On one side of the room Hyuga entered, and next to him was the young girl that Naruto had saved. The two Hyuga bowed respectfully and Naruto bowed while Hiruzen nodded, and if he took a step forward, I am here to ask about the fate of the infiltrator, and Nat here has something to tell his ward. He leaned down gently to push the girl who was hiding behind his leg forward, and she looked down. Naruto could feel her fears of disappointing his father, as well as her fears of being made fun of. For her eyes and being called weak, her mind seemed to hate herself, and Naruto was not used to feeling these emotions from children his age, and it was a little surprising. He quickly bowed. Thank you, Uzumaki-san. There was a brief silence before her father gave her a light smack, and then she blushed with embarrassment and looked down at the ground. For saving me. Thank you, I'm sorry. And yes, she sighed. And the disappointment of not being able to hide from Naruto made the boy frowned. He schooled his features when he realized the man had noticed and frowned slightly before effortlessly assuming an emotionless mask. Naruto wondered why they didn't just model the Anbu masks after the face of the Hyuga nobility. You have the thanks of the Hyuga clan, Uzumaki. In addition to my questions about the perpetrator, I would also like to ask you how you were able to detect him. Well, my own clanmates were trapped in his genjutsu. That is a clan technique, Yashi. I am sure you understand, Yashi, and he bowed his head in acceptance, but Naruto felt that Yashi's pride was not satisfied with that answer. And ambassador of Kumo or Kahama, what should be done with him? I will send him back with an escort to Kumagakure with a letter of his transgressions. The eyes of place, they didn't show even a hint of the anger that Naruto felt inside him. This man was probably one of the best liars Naruto had ever known. The Reik will deny any involvement and disavow him and degrade him. That's not justice in the war. For a try of kidnapping is if we return him, they can't claim us for our treaty. He's alive and returned home. Kumagakure will be ashamed and they will have to comply with the treaty, and we will have the higher moral ground. A political move. We give up justice to allow a false peace. Yes, Naruto. He stiffened when the professor's voice spoke for the first time in that meeting. It is not up to man to judge our fellow men as he gains more by following this path. There was a brief silence before Yashi bowed once more and left, and Nat bowed. quickly too and ran after his father after the door closed. Yuzin sighed and relaxed in his seat. He thinks you're being weak. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Are you afraid that's the case too? The old man sighed once again and turned away to look towards the town. Naruto joined him without saying a word, having to get on the chair to be able to look out the windows. The sun was beginning to set and the light breeze made the tops of the trees dance in the waning light. The town looked calm and beautiful. Naruto felt the sundaime looking at him, but he couldn't tell what he was thinking. All he could feel were his fears and regrets swirling in the background, not currently at the forefront of the great shinobi's mind. I think you have written enough for today, Naruto-kun. I think it's important that we start covering the politics of damage, the big five nations and the lesser nations. We'll start with a story from the age of warring clans and continue from there. Akatsuki Hiruzen smiled. It was good to have a student once more. Kakashi watched lazily as Naruto jumped towards him from the treetops. After another few months of training, after the Hyuga incident, the boy was finally at the Genin level. At least in terms of physical strength, his chakra coils were not yet ready to continuous use, and that exasperated the boy to no end. Kakashi, Itachi and Ruin were grateful for that fact. It kept the boy from progressing too much too soon. If the Uzumaki boy had his way, he would now be on a Genin team. If he weren't an apprentice to one of his three mentors, the boy was a more intellectual warrior than his father and was slowly becoming more energetic than his mother. It was quite terrifying, the idea that Naruto could potentially surpass Hokage in a decade or less. The boy was special and almost had the Akji, that permission to push him and challenge him so that his mind does not stray into other activities. Naruto had to stay busy and guided. Sarutobi was adamant about not creating another Orochimaru. In truth, Yuzin had sent a message to Jiraiya about the boy, but he didn't know if whether his former student had received the message or not. The wise toad had been badly beaten up when Minato passed away, and just as Kakashi had immersed himself back into his work to escape reality, Kakashi knew that the Sannin could return in a month or 10 years. There was no way to know how long he would need to Jiraiya away from Konoha. Kakashi leaned back as the boy struck with a claw and dodged the boy's left leg. He was getting faster, and that was a good thing. Speed was a cornerstone of his style preferred, and it was imperative that it be one of the main things to improve. He dodged another kick and jumped back when the boy tried to slide his legs under him. The boy instantly transitioned to respond to Kakashi's actions before he engaged him by being his speed and strength. The only reason he was too slow to hit the ground, and he took out his book and read half a page. Well, the boy was panting, exhausted. They had been at it for 4 hours now. Kakashi was impressed as always, but he wouldn't let Naruto know arrogance was not a trait useful to no shinobi. He tensed as the boy took a deep breath, and suddenly a layer of chakra gushed out. Isn't it well? He finally decided to use his ace. He could only use it for 30 seconds, but that would be the most tense 30 seconds of Kakashi's day. Kakashi instantly dismissed Uchiha and revealed his Sharingan as the boy flew towards him faster than before. Kakashi jumped into the air, throwing a ninja wire kunai at a nearby tree. The boy's chakra claws rose towards his location. 10 seconds. He moved out of the way of Lost G chakra slashes, only for a third chakra arm to cut his taunt ninja cable, leaving him in the air with no means to redirect. A fourth chakra arm pierced him from behind, and Kakashi's body disappeared with a puff of smoke to reveal the construction of chakra had pierced a trunk. Naruto growled and turned to look directly at Kakashi, who was hiding behind some trees. 20 seconds. The chakra arms flew towards Kakashi, and he quickly ran through the trees surrounding the boy's position. He could feel the chakra boiling. He slid right behind him and dove back into the middle of the clearing. 30 seconds. He opened his eyes in disbelief when the boy roared at him and charged, the cloak still active, his skin beginning to peel off his body and dissipating into the cloak before Kakashi. The boy's eyes rolled back in his head and he collapsed to the ground. The corrupting chakra incinerated the grass beneath him. After 2 seconds, the cloak of chakra disappeared, and Kakashi wasted no time in picking up the boy and running towards the hospital like hell. Had let a training session ruin the boy's life. He poured lightning chakra into his legs and ran faster than ever. His brother wouldn't die today. Kabuto, he had a troubled life, a very troubled life. If you asked anyone else, they would actually say that it wasn't a great life, but it was all the young man had. He didn't remember his parents. He didn't remember his own name. He only knew what they had given him. His name was one of the orphans in the orphanage. His glasses, no, his death dance training. From his adoptive mother in his own hands, from Danzo his new role of Orochimaru-sama. He himself didn't know who Kabuto was. He was a canvas, and he had mastered changing and becoming what he was told to become. He hated how it felt, even he didn't really know, which was why should no one else knew who he was either. So why did it matter if he knew, except that he did care. It kept him awake at night. He was parked inside Konoha once again, even under Danzo's nose, and he didn't know if he hated the village that took away his family, her love, how it made him remember when he was a true leaf shinobi, and how it made him feel like he belonged. Like with everything else in his life, he felt indifferent to him. The village gave him nothing now that his use for him had run out. Now he was a spy, and spies were Everything and nothing. Kabuto hated being nothing, and that is what drove him to press forward with an almost unmatched zeal in his studies, and training his skills is what made him mortal. He cheered up from his job of writing a file when he felt his supervisor's chakra signature approaching his cubicle. He was years ahead of any nurse or doctor in this building, but it was necessary to go unnoticed. And that was difficult to achieve from the center of attention, so he found himself stuck in the lowly position of working in cubicles most of the time. Kabuto, come, we have a special case that could be a great learning opportunity. Kabuto nodded politely, put down his pen, and quickly followed him. He was ushered towards an emergency room. Shinobi Trauma and almost turned pale, identified two of the chakra signatures inside as belonging to Iru sensor, and Kakashi attack is not a good sign. He was going over escape plans the entire way through the doorway, and even as he walked towards on the side of the bed, a small boy with blonde hair lay on top of him and tossed and turned as his burned skin slowly grew back in front of his very eyes. Kabuto was amazed at the natural healing speed. It was quite impressive. Orochimaru-sama would definitely be interested in hearing about this ability. This is the patient Naruto Uzumaki. You will be in charge of his stay. Amazing. Kabuto. He apparently blinked and looked at his superior, watching Hokage from the corner of his eye. Why, I almost tensed when the professor stepped forward. Naruto-kun is a special child, and we believe that having a younger doctor like you will calm him down. Kabuto narrowed his eyes because he knew there were more things that were not being told, but he simply nodded his head. He was a doctor from Konohagakure, a humble genin. I'll just take good care of him. Hokage nodded and left the room, starting to discuss something with the head doctor, and Kakashi gave Kabuto a penetrating look. You better, a humble doctor wouldn't make fun of Hing's threat, and that's why he didn't imagine the day he could. Taking off the skin and rubbing it on the arrogant ninja's face was a strong secondary reaction. He took a second to look at the boy more closely. He desperately walked to the Anbu who was studying him from the outside. This boy was receiving more assurance that an heir of the clan must be the one. Jinchuriki. Naruto opened the eyes after having a long argument with Kurama and losing access to the chakra cloak in any training until he really understood the gravity of abusing such a bad gift. Blah blah blah. Naruto knew he shouldn't have pushed the limits of overusing the Kurama's chakra, knew how dangerous it was, but he couldn't help it. Kakashi had continued reading his book, and it was starting to irritate Naruto's pride that he was only taken seriously when he fought as Jinchuriki apologized to Kurama and accepted the additional punishment of feeling for what he put his body through, and he woke up to feel his body on fire. His skin was burning, and his pain was clouding his mind and making his vision blurry. He heard a mechanical beep from a nearby machine that sped up exponentially, and then he felt a relaxing chakra green that healed his and numbed his nerves. The medical ninja worked diligently, and after a few minutes, Naruto was able to open his eyes completely and see clearly. His doctor was surprisingly young. Naruto knew how difficult medical ninjutsu was, and you had to be extremely competent to be a doctor at the Shinobi Hospital. He had silver hair tied back with really simple glasses. The doctor gave him a warm smile, and his eyes checked Naruto for injuries. He spoke, and the words were warm and kind, and Naruto immediately tensed up when his herd fighting instincts kicked in. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Everything Naruto was seeing and hearing wasn't even close to what was boiling beneath the surface of the man. Stop it. Go away. Naruto began to panic and tried to get out his bed and began to struggle harder as his doctor began to physically restrain him. Naruto-kun, stay still and calm down. I am not going to hurt you. Naruto struggled. Even when he felt the man was technically telling the truth, he wouldn't hurt him right now. After a few more tries, he took a quick breath and was about to call Anbu outside to help him. He could feel they were out of earshot, but inside, and if he gave them the code they would know he was in trouble. That's when he moved his hand to the side about to point out to his guards that he felt something else inside the man. Fear. Fear of being discovered, fear of someone in Konoha, fear of Danzo. Naruto froze his eyes, searched the black eyes of the silver-haired man, and he relaxed against his pillow. Do you know Danzo is killing me? Now won't help you serve Danzo. Then Kabuto blinked and opened his mouth, and Naruto knew that a sickly sweet lie was all he was going to hear, so he interrupted him. You can't lie to me, and I know you're no longer of use. Now you serve Orochimaru. True. That's not much better. Both men are cruel manipulators with almost no degree of empathy, but you already know that. Naruto smiled at how nervous he could make the doctor. What is your name, by the way, and remember, I will know if you lie. Kabuto frowned after the boy introduced himself. The boy was strange. I definitely needed to report this to Arimiya-sama. Oh no, you won't tell him anything about this meeting? Kabuto suppressed the urge to growl and instead smiled politely. Of course, Naruto-san, I can ask you why you think the ramifications for you if you do it. They are simply not in your best interest. The reality that a 4.5-year-old child was speaking to him this way almost threw Kabuto in a loop in himself, but for the child to somehow believe having the advantage in This stand was just insulting strangely. As soon as he thought, the boy pouted and looked to the side. For God's sake, don't treat me like a baby Kabuto, no, or I'll tell Kakashi Niasen that you're a spy. The idea of being forced to get tangled up with attack inside Konoha without support at this moment, it was chilling. Haha, yes, it's quite scary to fight Niasen, that's why I'm here. That made the spy stop. The boy was already training with Kaki attack. That was very interesting. Kabuto was starting to get an idea of exactly what made the Sundaime so protective of the boy. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to follow the flow of the conversation and see what he could find out. Can you read minds, Naruto-kun? Are you part of the Yamanaka? Naruto rolled his eyes wide inside. No, I'm not Yamanaka, I don't read minds. However, I can't tell you what I can do, it's an important S-rank secret. Kabuto's eyes shone with interest, and Naruto leaned forward. Now it's my turn. Why would you want to work for someone that won't help you find out what you want to know? The boy was quite presumptuous to think that his technique, anyone who could pinpoint anything that shook. Kabuto prided himself on his infiltration skills above all else, and this kid was going to find out. Very soon. Orochimaru is not that bad. The boy frowned once more and leaned back. He said, I said I'm not lying. I'm not. Orochimaru is not a bad person. You don't think he's a sociopath and a murderer. You're just impressed with his power. Don't like. Kabuto frowned. Promise to help me. Kabuto's blood began to boil when the boy simply laughed. You know he's not going to give you exactly what you want. And what do I want? Naruto-san. The boy frowned thoughtfully and was silent for a few seconds. Do you want to know who you are? But that's crazy. It's just you. Kabuto's brain began to go into overdrive, trying to figure out what he had done wrong and what had given him away. At the same time, he suddenly felt overwhelmed by having brought to light his secret desires, for he had no way expected the boy to be so intuitive. And when the waves of emotions reached their boiling point inside him, the boy blinked. Oh, that's the problem. Orochimaru can't help you the way you want, Kabuto, for the same reason Danzo can't. But that's because they don't really care about you but about your service. I know, Naruto-san, but there is much more to my situation than that. Yes, your mother. No, Naruto tensed when he felt the killing intent and quickly waved his hands in front of him. Same. I'm sorry, I don't even realize I'm saying what I'm processing out loud. And I stopped when Kabuto gently pushed him down to lie down on his bed. Kabuto, for all his intelligence, he had never predicted the possibility of having a conversation with a Kohen boy about his life and his problems. It was the surreality of the situation that allowed him to sit up, and it was his curiosity that pushed him forward. You can feel emotions. The boy shuddered and felt a smug satisfaction. At least Naughty was the only one whose secrets were being revealed in this small talk. Well, not all, although I can't say more. You understand the importance of keeping secrets. Kabuto nodded slowly. He did. A silence grew between the two. Kabuto couldn't leave the boy with this knowledge. He couldn't risk it, but he couldn't kill him, and he wasn't a Yamanaka, and kidnapping the Jinchuriki wasn't possible. And as he thought about potential actions, he looked at the boy's face and realized that the boy knew what he was thinking, and he himself was at some kind of dead end. Kabuto-san, I have an idea. The vulnerability present in the little boy as he spoke was very surprising. It was then that Kabuto realized that he was talking to a 4-year-old boy this entire time and identified if Naruto had stayed at the orphanage, so maybe Danzo would have recruited him. Maybe. He nodded his head silently to show he was listening, and the boy looked him straight in the eyes. What if we make a deal? I know who you are, and I can help you find yourself, and in return you have to defecting back to Konohagakure. Kabuto blinked. It was absurd, a childish idea. Naruto-san, do you realize that I was a Konoha ninja before? Yes, and if I really rejoin the ranks, Danzo would do it. The boy frowned and nodded laconically his head. I know what I would do. You wouldn't inform me, and I would tell Hiruzen Jiji whatever you tell me. Ridiculous comical madness. And how would this benefit me? The boy smiled. Because you wouldn't feel the pain or hate that you feel, and I would keep you safe. The last 5 words, they were said with such innocence, but with such conviction that Kabuto felt his will weaken. Logically, he should kill the boy. Now he takes the body and flees the village, but the boy, even in the way he presented himself, he reminded Kabuto of the orphans of the Non's orphanage. No, the longing to belong was there, and he was really getting the better end of the deal objectively. If the boy could keep his promise, if he could somehow be punished by the Sundaime, he felt crazy. But right, for the first time in years, Kabuto recognized the will of fire burning once again. He rushed to control it, so that the boy would not realize how much he yearned for exactly what was being offered to him. Instead, he just smiled politely. I will think about it. Naruto-san, tomorrow we can talk more. What do you say? The boy smiled widely, as if he had just won some kind of battle, and held out his hand to him. I think we would be great friends, Kabuto-kun. Maybe we will. Naruto-kun. Kabuto arrived early the next morning to check on Naruto, and was only a little surprised to find the boy cheerful and waiting for him. He had expected the boy to sleep more considering his age. It seemed like he should have known he would be disappointed. The boy began to nod excitedly, while Kabuto methodically examined his vital signs. The spy had been up all night and going over his options, planning for each and every one of the eventualities. Came to As to the conclusion that he couldn't fool the boy, at least he couldn't without additional data. It didn't seem possible to fool him, so he had to test the boy, see how insightful he really was. He paid half attention to the boy's ramblings as he searched for a syringe in his coat. It was full of a low-intensity toxin, potentially fatal if not treated within 72 hours. He gave the boy a smile as he administered the dose to the boy's IV. The boy watched him silently as he injected the toxin with curiosity in his eyes. "Are you trying to kill me, Kabuto-kun? I thought we were over this yesterday." The boy pouted and crossed his arms, and once again Kabuto was surprised once again. The boy didn't even seem upset. "Of course not, Naruto-kun, but you knew it didn't." The boy smiled sheepishly and Kabuto discovered that he actually had a limit to his patience and was getting close to him. "How long did you know that he didn't intend to kill you? 10 minutes ago, when you entered the building." Kabuto-kun. Kabuto didn't know how to answer this whole scenario. It was crazy. There was no precedent in his experiences to take note that he wanted to test the boy, to test the extent of his powers, and it all ended the moment he entered the building. Little by little he was beginning to accept that the boy was a prodigy, to end all prodigies, at least when it comes to sensory abilities. He wants to be a shinobi. Naruto-kun watched as the boy smiled, nodded, and blurted out his dreams of being the cashier. He looked for signs of childhood delusions, weaknesses, or logical fallacies. He found none, at least none below the surface. The boy was energetic and boisterous, but his eyes showed the true picture. No matter how bright they shined, there was an eternal glow of insight that made Kabuto wary. He didn't know if that was an alio or just more worrying. "Naruto-kun, I think we should talk about our current situation." "I do too. I think, Kabuto-kun, you've been worried about it all morning. We have to talk about it, and then when you agree we have to start working on your lie." "My lie?" Naruto nodded, his small head wisely nodding in situation. "I do too. I think, Kabuto-kun, you've been worried about it all morning. We have to talk about it, and then when you agree we have to start working on your lie." "My lie?" Naruto nodded, his small head wisely nodding in the oversized hospital gown, accentuating the absurdity of the gesture. "You have to become a better liar if you're going to trick Orochimaru." "To trick Orochi, yes." Naruto actually tried to get up. Kabuto quickly pushed him down, but he couldn't stop the boy from ranting. "This is not a game. I know what position you're in, and that the only way to be safe from here on out is if the only person you can't fool is me. I can feel every negative emotion inside you, Kabuto-kun. I can tell you're conflicted right now. Fear, yes, fear." The boy silenced his rebuttal before that I could even open my mouth. "I can feel hatred in you a lot. You despise others, you envy people for their happiness, their identities, but you regret what you feel. I have become not much, but you do it. You have deceived yourself with how buried it is, but I can feel it. I can feel everything." The boy sighed and closed himself off for a moment. Kabuto could see the slightest twitch on his face, hinting at the formation of reflexive expressions, almost as if he were having another conversation. Although as a Jinchuriki, it is very possible that the boy would never. He was alone was yet to be seen. Whether that was good or not, but he was looking out for Kabuto's safety. The boy clearly already saw him as an asset. Kabuto wasn't comfortable with that. He had gotten used to serving people more powerful than him. People who thought that they understood him, but they never did, not completely. That was what gave him security. If things didn't look good for him, he always had a backup plan, an escape route. He could attack before they could. They were stronger than him, but he could trick them. This boy was weaker than him, but he couldn't fool him. He didn't have that security if he had to work underneath. Naruto had also not gotten over the fact that the most disturbing person who would seek his loyalty was a child. There were many dangers that also came to get Naruto. The child was a Jinchuriki. While Orochimaru may not have been interested in the boy, yet there was another man who thought he had turned Kabuto into his spy, Sasori, who had ordered Kabuto to keep in mind the issue of any Jinchu. Kobu Sasori was part of one very secret society or organization that could mean a large force of ninjas searching for the Jinchuriki in the future. Then there was the fact that Naruto was loyal to Konoha and had no real political influence to protect Kabuto until he did. Kabuto's relationship alone, it could be unofficial, and if they found out, it would be bad for both of them. Although worse for Kabuto, and on top of that the child was the son of the 4th Hokage, and there was no way Yagak would let him live for a long time. He would be a Kabuto. He controlled his thoughts as they accelerated in pace and intensity. The boy was looking at him, and Naruto had given him crucial information before the boy could feel every negative emotion. It was only safe to assume that Naruto had already felt Kabuto's every thought. It certainly made communication a lot easier, although he was finally starting to realize that he couldn't really lie to Naruto. That was also worrying. "What would you ask me?" The boy perked up almost as if he didn't know that Kabuto would choose something to deliberate on in the future. "Well, I don't know if you know things that could help Konoha or save lives, tell me, but if it's too dangerous, don't do it. I want you to be as safe as you can be, and Wonder, you can't lie to me, and you have to keep your word. You can't break a promise, and I promise I won't break any of mine." The boy extended a hand and they both held their breath. The boy didn't know if he would shake in Kabuto. He didn't know if he would. It was dangerous. The boy wasn't as strong as Orochimaru yet, But Kabuto wasn't thinking. Long term, the boy was the Jinchuriki of the Kaiban Kitsune, son of Yellow Flash, was about 4 years old and had taken Kabuto to a jackmate. He just needed time and then he could become as strong as Orochimaru. Not only is he stronger, but the boy was a good person. Kabuto could not detect a hint of malice or evil intentions. If he did not join, he was declaring that he would serve Orochimaru, he would serve against Konoha and become a powerful enemy. That thought prompted Kabuto's imagination to paint a portrait of the shinobi in which the boy could become. He performed a quick analysis of the boy's chakra and intellect now and made a quick and dirty estimate of the boy's strength in the future. His power is capable of royal loyalty and cutting corruption and betrayal at its roots. Kabuto could imagining a root that he would love to see burned from the great Konoha tree was indeed dangerous, but Kabuto was now beginning to see the potential of the situation. Naruto professed a desire to be Hokage and was already working. With those around him, he was trying to seduce Kabuto into defecting to his band. The boy's face grimaced at the darker interpretation of his actions, but Kabuto paid him little attention. This was too much. Kabuto had spent his entire life being denied what he wished at all times, to have everything right here in front of him. That's why he was hesitating. It was too good, and yet if he let it go now, his eyes hardened as he reached out to shake his new leader's hand. He was worried and unsure, but he was also proud. He felt the will of fire burning within him once more as his smile matched Naruto's, and he had to pretend it was the middle of summer in the village, and the heat saturated the air and carried the sounds of a bustling town quite easily. The Sarutobi clan compound was on the northern outskirts of the village proper. It was one of the closest compounds to the Hokage monument and the Hokage tower respectively. Hiruzen took the time to allow the atmosphere of the perfect day to wash over him as he had an early breakfast. The conversations with Kumagakure had resumed after his attempted kidnapping of poor Hinata Hyuga. Earl was nervous for a while, but seemed to calm down after a while. A tragedy that the shinobi world was still so indifferent to its children. Her future had taken months, but the Yondai Marai Kage was finally forced to commit to the treaty, so that his subterfuge would not being shown to the shinobi world. Being undercover was nothing new, but being trapped was always a bad deal, no matter who found out. It could be seen as a sign of weakness for Kumo, while it is a sign of strength for Konoha. Konoha had even shown mercy and forgiven the general infiltrator, who wasn't too keen on letting the story leak. Then they would meet for a peace deal. He wanted to enjoy his time as much as he could before the trip. The chances of anything happening were slim, but every time Akage left his village there was a chance he wouldn't return. The only thing he was worried about was whether he should bring Naruto or not. The boy would be an incredible asset and could further enforce a true agreement, but he hadn't determined if it was worth securing a true treaty to reveal the asset they had in Naruto. As soon as talking about the boy, Sarutobi smiled from across the table as Naruto ate a larger than normal breakfast in front of him. After having returned home from the hospital, the boy returned to his normal state. The boy, he was a few months away from turning 5 and had grown quite a bit. Sarutobi knew he had to make a decision and wanted to talk to Kakashi about it first, but Danzo had surprised him by showing up at his office yesterday before picking up Naruto from the hospital. It seemed like the old warhawk was starting to come to the same conclusion that Yusen Naruto should enter the academy or go straight to an apprenticeship. Sarutobi had accepted that the life he wanted for the boy would never become. He knew the boy would beg to finally go to the academy and would understand what that meant better than anyone his age, but it was still a heavy burden to force on any boy. Saying this, he had no intention of leaving. Let Danzo take charge of his training. That's why Naruto was already looking at him with a face of pure emotion. He really didn't keep anything a secret from the real Uzumaki. Jiji, I can go to the academy. Oh yes, Naruto-kun. Which one do you think would be a better option, Naruto? To himself in his thoughts, what do you think, Kurama? I think you shouldn't wake me up from my nap to answer a stupid question. You already know everything school would teach you. Naruto nodded. A small sleepy frown indicated how much he was thinking about the matter. Yes, but I could do friends join a Genin team. I don't think that will work, Naruto. I don't think they will accept you. I may be wrong, but I think you know what you should do. Naruto sighed and then smiled softly. I think I should take an apprenticeship, Jiji. I don't think the academy is for me. I'm too different. Yusen smiled softly and reached out to pat Naruto's shoulder. Okay, Naruto, I understand. Did you have any idea who? Naruto nodded excitedly. What about Wasel Senpai? I would love to learn from him. The god of shinobi nodded and Naruto was ecstatic when he noticed that Sarutobi was testing his choice. The old man smiled softly. I will talk to him about it. Thank you, Jiji. Naruto coughed as he landed on the ground once again. Weasel had dragged him to a training ground and told him that he was going to be his new sensei. Just as Naruto cheered, he had kicked his legs and sent Naruto to the dust. He then started asking questions, and every time Naruto answered wrong, his next exchange was especially brutal. Naruto groaned as a hand pulled him to his feet before swinging wildly in hopes of surprising to his sense, and with a shot in the kidney. There is no such luck. Who are you? I am Naruto. Uzumaki kick dodge jump. What? Hides your sword. The will of fire. Backflip kick in the stomach. Jump off the ground. What are you? Naruto. The weasel mask that once associated with safety and security appeared in his vision before pain shot from his chest as his sense and buried his knee in her. A shinobi. What is a shinobi? Naruto-kun. Naruto quickly dodged a right hook and launched a counterattack as he a weasel soldier was. Crouching sensei, his fist didn't hit anything as his sensei jumped back, dodged the next shuriken spear. Sukunai jump dodge jump attack. Why a shinobi fights Naruto-kun. A kick out of nowhere knocked Naruto onto his side and he rolled to minimize the impact. His jade gasped for air as her sensei remained hidden until a ferocious attack told her that she had answered wrong incorrectly. Her weasel people furiously bombarded Naruto with attacks, only stopping when Naruto fell to his knees and spat blood, the red falling from his mouth. And he fell on the grass beneath him, and he saw him in red. We start the timer now. Start again. What are you? Naruto. A shinobi. Kakashi smiled as he watched his sensei's son draw idly in the Hokage office. Those thoughts about his sensei's departure brought bringing up his pain, and the ray of sunshine always stopped when he perceived those feelings to look up and simply smile at Kakashi. The boy, burdened by the loss of his parents and constantly reminded by Kakashi's memories, he always tried to comfort his brother as his first reaction. Usually he would feel guilty for constantly bombarding the child with these feelings, and that would usually end with the child feeling it and walking over to grab his hand. Luckily he was able to stop himself this time and just smiled back at him. The smile behind his mask. Day by day his guilt was slowly diminishing. That was a miracle in itself. His father's death, Tsukumo, had destroyed him. He had been broken into pieces, and his personality had been as sharp as broken glass. He had been so destroyed it hurt to this day to remember those memories. He had hated his father and dedicated himself to the shinobi lifestyle. It was only thanks to his team, to his sensei Minato, that he returned to normal. Oh well, as close to normal as he could. He had earned quite a reputation as a pervert, lazy, importunate smut and reader, and to be honest, he had been too lazy to actively try to change that perception, which gave the lazy part of his reputation more weight than it should have. It was for any shinobi. That doesn't mean that the death of his teamer sensei made him falter as a shinobi in any sense. He had never trained harder. The only reason he wasn't listed as a rank S shinobi in any bingo book was due to the fact that he was the acting Anbu commander. He had a moment where he hesitated after Minato's death, a period of time where he let his grief consume him. It was thanks to Naruto that he was surprised a boy had done what no one had really done and eased his guilty conscience. That is to say, every time he saw the boy did everything he could to make him feel better, and it really worked. The man he was today was stronger, and not only in terms of physical strength or ability, was stronger in spirit and will than Minato had ever been. Minato, Rin and Kabuto took a broken glass ball and were able to smooth the edges. Naruto had been able to reforge the glass and fill its cracks. The boy had made Kakashi feel whole in ways he didn't even know was empty. That was the boy's power, and why he had needed to become as strong as he could to protect him. If the boy hadn't had his quirk, he would have been content to remain stuck floating in his pain until the boy had the age to need H, and sensei would have been content to leave the boy without interacting with him for over a decade. Would have been a mistake, and all he would have to excuse would be cowardly defenses, although if that had happened, Kakashi might admit that he wouldn't either. He would not have been the best guardian for the boy, he would not have been a sufficient father, and could not have taken care of him alone, but he could have been an older brother figure, much of what he was now. It was a simple irony that after the boy cured him of his past regrets, he would find that he spent his time regretting actions he had not taken, but could have done. Of course, the boy was also very helpful in de-stressing Kakashi from the clutches of his new position. Leading an Anbu team and losing a member was one thing, leading all the teams every loss was traced back to him, and whether the blame was at his feet or not, Kakashi found himself helpless. But to blame himself, he was a creature of guilt and pain, was the natural action to take. Naruto made everything. Was it worth it? He would have fought against countries for his old team. Hinata would fight against the world to protect Naruto. Luckily he was not the only person taking care of the child nowadays. Hiruzen, Sarutobi, Itachi, Uchiha were probably the best caretakers he could ask for to take care of the child. Usually the three of them agreed. That's why when I didn't agree with any of them, it was enough to make him a little uneasy. It's never good for shinobi to get uneasy. Today was shaping up to be one of those days. I mean, a Kakashi I'll bring to Naruto-kun with me. The Hokage was going to the top to meet the 4th Raikage, and he wanted to take Naruto with him. Now this put Kakashi in a situation he never thought he would be in. He never imagined that the Hokage himself could be a threat to Naruto before he could stop his subconscious. He had already gone through contingencies of grabbing Naruto and going rogue. It wasn't ideal, But if their leader was going to recklessly endanger Naruto now, he would only be more brazen in the future. It was just Kakashi's trust in Hiruzen what allowed him to break that train of thought to allow the Hokage to say his piece was not so naive as to not immediately associate his commander's smile with the god of shinobi after having guessed what had just passed through his mind. Full of pride at how far he would go to protect Naruto, but he was lucky that the Hokage was merciful. His behavior had bordered on betrayal. He couldn't protect the boy if he was executed for his thoughts, of course. Naruto chose that moment to grab his hand and walked away. He realized that he had needed the boy's extra comfort anyway. Today, oh, these sweet little ironies, could Itachi-san not see it? Naruto cocked his head to the side. Sensei's name is Itachi. Wow. The Sundaime sighed and pinched the bridge of his neck. Knows well. Kakashi laughed sheepishly. It was a minor flaw, but he let his guard down with Naruto. It was minor, but still a flaw. Itachi is on a mission. I'll take him with me so he can learn about diplomacy and see a little more of the world beyond from our walls. Danzo has also shown a greater interest in the boy. I won't do it. Don't leave him unattended. Kakashi immediately nodded. He relaxed better. Next to lockage than vulnerable to Rot's tender mercies, poor Tenzo had not yet fully recovered from his time as a kino, and he knew that the role team was doing well under Itachi's leadership. But he missed seeing the Mokuton user regularly. Perhaps Naruto could help Tenzo heal like he had done with Kakashi. Actually, the boy could help heal all the Zanbu, being able to accurately identify each individual's problems more efficient than a Yamanaka. Honestly, the boy could become an honorary member, execute some select and safe missions with the Ro team. It would do wonders with the experience. More than what he would learn at the academy. He would talk about it later with the Hokage as he wishes Hokage-sama not suspect the Raikage to accompany him. Yes, that's why I think it's a good idea to create another personality for the young Naruto-kun. Itachi-san has professed a desire to allow Naruto to work with his team and in controlled environments. He can't do it like Naruto. Uzumaki today was definitely one of those days, but maybe in a good way. He was thinking the same thing. Hokage-sama would need a codename. He turned to Naruto, who was still holding his hand, and looked him in the eyes with a disconcerting intelligence. How would you like your name? Naruto-kun. I would like it to be called Konoha. Kakashi blinked, and Yusen laughed. Kakashi chuckled. Naruto-kun. Usually Anbu chooses animals to actually Kakashi. I think it's a good name for him. Kakashi couldn't tell who had the wider smile, Naruto or Yuzen, and he doubted even his Sharingan would give him a clue. Yuzen smiled as he handed Naruto a blank Anbu mask. The only defining feature was the Konohagakure symbol on his forehead, and his two eye holes were soft and monotonous, and the lack of anything else made it disconcerting. It was definitely one of a kind. The boy was ecstatic when he took it in his hand and put it on his face. It fit perfectly, and he looked up to meet Saratobi's eyes. Yusen couldn't help the pang of pride and sadness upon seeing the child. He was almost 5 years old and had been placed inside the Anbu without taking into account that it was a special location, and in no way was he a full member. The history books would not remember that. They would remember the fact that the Sundaime Hokage in a time of peace placed his predecessor, that was the objective fact. The youngest member to join Anbu was now 4 years old, and it almost broke his heart, but he was the best option to protect Naruto. Anbu were the elite, and they were a family in themselves. You were active or retired. Once you put on the mask, your family grew exponentially. They may not be his friends yet, or they may not respect the boy, but they would die for him. They would have died for any civilian or citizen of Konoha, but now they would be more conscious of him. They would be attentive, although not only to make sure that he lived up to the new brotherhood to which he belonged. Anbu was for life, and Naruto needed that protection. He needed the power of Konoha at his side at all times until he could protect Konoha alone with his power. There was the blood of Anahe inside him, and a Byulu in his belly. Naruto was special. That was what allowed Saratobi to sleep at night. The boy trembled with joy, but he did not utter any childish exclamation of joy or pride. The boy had been painfully watching the Lambu for the past few days, forgetting that his gaze forced Anbu to relocate if they hid. Yuzen was amused to discover that the Anbu had discovered 12 new hiding places inside his office in the span of an hour, not that it lasted much, but after Iru Sentos was silent, the boy jumped and realized what he had been facilitating. Musical chairs. Anbu had not missed the sighs of relief from his guard. The news had quickly made its way through Anbu, and more or less they knew what was going to happen. The cashier room would become an honorary member, and would even carry out missions with the esteemed Ro team. It was almost ridiculous if those rumors had not been spread by Hyuga himself. Saratobi was almost exasperated as the days went by. It seemed like almost every Anbu had circulated around the office to get a first impression of a boy. Then they were shocked to realize that the teams and some other stories about the boy had been true. His sensory abilities were unimaginably powerful. None of them had been able to hide his presence. Although some had evaded his sight, the boy was still somewhat susceptible to genjutsu, especially Kurama did not consider the caster a threat. The boy eventually grew bored of trying to find the Anbu agents, but responded to Hokage promptly and precision every time he asked the boy how many were in his office at any given time. It was quite Impressive, the Anbu thought so too. Word had even spread among some of the lower use rank shinobi and had to talk to Shikakuner, the Jounin commander, about why it was imperative to have such rumors about a new Anbu initiate for the safety of Konoha. Once you piqued Nara's curiosity was never satiated. That being said, some Anbu made a make-up visit at you for letting information slip, so it was Naruto himself who was able to identify the culprits and verify their identity when they showed up to accept the punishment. Yusin had still verified it by other means. He had learned the lesson of trusting the boy too implicitly, even if it provoked a guilty pout on the boy's face. He never complained, knowing that was the consequence of lying to Itachi, going against Locke's orders. Once he was relieved that the boy was already part of the shinobi elite, but anyway, it was a little unsettling. He crouched down and placed the boy on his back and smiled when his young ward complained, "Jiji, I can run, yes Naruto-kun, but you are still not as fast as me or my guards. I would enjoy the break from having to run in the future. Maybe I need you to carry me." That made the boy laugh, and without stopping smiling, Yusin left through the gates of Kagak towards the land of iron. He was not trying to be here, and he was not happy with the series of events that led him to be here. His advisor Darui, he had warned him that trying to take the Hyuga heiress away would probably fail, but he trusted the men he had chosen, and also the Hyuga's wrath. Being disappointed twice was infuriating. Mureso was Lockage's response. He had never been a true believer in diplomacy, believing that military might was the best bargaining chip, but even he could see how damaging it would be to reject Lockage's request for his village, as Raikage was obligated to do everything he could to protect them, even if it meant meeting the old monkey. With he brought Killer B and C Anbu, normally he would have brought less and he wouldn't even have brought B, but this wasn't just any diplomat. This was the god of shinobi, and he didn't believe the rumors that had spread following the death of Yanaimi Hokage, knew that Biju did not die. B had confirmed that fact. Konoha still retained the Kyuubi and hid it in an attempt to propagate the image that they were not mobilizing their forces and honestly demanded peace between the nations. Was a lot of and did not believe it entered the room in which the samurai were organizing conversations, and he became irritated. The Hokage had two Anbu guards behind him and a baby sitting next to him masked with an unusual mask with the Konoha insignia. I was not happy to be here. He was not happy to be here being add to diplomacy, and he certainly hated being thrown off balance by the sheer impudence of the smiling monkey sitting in front of him. That feeling only increased when the Farfar boy in shock slammed his hands on the table and yelled at him. The Raikage Hokage-sama is not a monkey. I was not happy. Hiruzen could see that the second the Yum Raikage had entered the room he had never known him to be a patient or diplomatic man, and it seemed that some things hadn't changed. The man had brought a pretty impressive guard to boot. He was quite happy with his own guard, relying on the experience of Gorkat and Konoha. It was a shame that flush of pride he felt at the thought of an agent named Konoha was overcome by a sigh when said agent gave in to his childish impulse to respond to some thought. But she was sure the Raikage had. Upon seeing him, however, he thought he would have earned more respect than being referred to as a monkey by his fellow Kage, even if that reference was in the privacy of his thoughts. Raj Dono, I apologize, in the name of the outburst of my subordinate. I am sure that we could begin these peace agreements with an honest intention between us to do everything possible to unite. It would be very beneficial for both peoples. As he grunted and sat in his seat, his right hand a man who appears in the bingo books like Darui, so did the mediator samurai sat equidistant between both parties on one side in silence, until any deception began. AC crossed his arms and leaned forward. I too seek to reach a peaceful resolution. Akito, he is lying. Sarutobi, he made no move to listen to Konoha's response at his side, but the focus immediately shifted back to the unknown Anbu people at his side. Having Naruto with this personality would be of no use if they didn't employ their talents. They even had a perfect cover for him. For him to be introduced to Raikon this way was a reckless policy. Bold, reckless and hated. He would not be irritated with a fellow Kage. But he would be a victim of manipulation by someone who considered inferior to his position, a position that Naruto Daru narrowed his eyes at the masked ninja next to the Hokage. It seemed like the Raikage's hand wouldn't be so easy to fool. Excuse me, what is this? Sarutobi. This union was not among the Kage of our villages. The large shirtless man looked. The Konoha and Bruno, you shouldn't make baseless accusations. Sarutobi boy took his time and slowly took out a scroll. All the ninjas tensed when he untangled it and looked at it, even young Naruto to his pride. His eyes slowly scanned the blank scroll and raised an eyebrow. Is like that? You have no more plans to kidnap a child who possesses one of Noah's Kenka. That was all they told him, that Naruto would need a shinobi who was going to be a master of his body, without being able to say guilt one way or another. The Kages were steps above the mere rabble, guarding all the most valuable and terrible secrets of their villages. Their minds were another matter. Some things cannot be trained or controlled, hence why the Yamanaka before Naruto were so sought after and vital to counterintelligence. However, even the Yamanaka would fight to get the secrets out of a box's mind, so it was good luck that Naruto wasn't a Yamanaka. His abilities far eclipsed theirs. Naruto nodded and Sarutobi wanted to growl. Under his grandfatherly smile, he passed the scroll to the boy without taking his eyes off the Raikage. "What intelligence did you gather in Kumo-Konosan?" Those in front of them immediately tensed at the casual admission of infiltration and espionage. If only they knew the truth, they would not find any trace of Agent Konoha inside their rows, and that would only make them believe it even more. Naruto took the scroll and pretended to be reading the empty scroll. In case Hyuga's kidnapping was not successful, the next operation would target the Uchiha clan, targeting Fugaku's youngest son Sarutobi's side. Acting like if the news didn't surprise him, he wanted to laugh at the audacity of the leader in front of him. The Uchiha. There have been wars started by fewer demons. The Hyuga incident was reason enough to start a war. Danzo had advised it himself. "You seem interested in taking advantage of my hospitality, Reikjido. Are you? So surprised that I don't have operations in place to be ready for this eventuality. Your people have wanted quick Genkai for a long time. Me too, I'm getting tired of being ignored in my quest for peace. I thought I would acquire influence goals that would disable Kumo's stance." As one of the greats, the boy slowly pulled out a paintbrush and began writing names. Sarutobi marveled at the precision of his perceptions through sheer emotion. He also shuddered at the sudden thought of what might have happened if Naruto had been born in another nation. Naruto handed over the scroll and nodded specifically. "It seemed your two Jinchuriki Killer Bee and Uoni the Rake seemed to take the threat seriously." As he immediately stood up and slammed his fists on the table, the mediator samurai stood up. "Immediately, gentlemen, for please contain your temper." Sarutobi smiled, and that did little to calm his companion's cage. "Of course I would never threaten the life of a Kumo shinobi while I'm in the middle of peace talks. You surely know that Reikjidono. I don't appreciate your attempts being thrown in my face of espionage or keijo, especially when you surround yourself with them." Yusin shrugged and rolled up the parchment. "I wouldn't have brought it up if there was nothing to mention. I was sad that you still weren't honest with me, Reikjidono. I was hoping to truly join our nations together." He sat back down in his chair, idly kicking the debris of the table away from him. Derry seemed to sigh and looked away. But Hiruzen saw that his attention was now focused on Naruto. "The treaty is still official, isn't it, or Sidono?" Sarutobi snorted and provoked another snarl from the treaty that his ambassador ignored on the day it began under his orders. "Beg, you know it, and I have news that your damage is not so excited about this mistake of yours." Rito Agrumo, but he seemed to accept the lie easily enough. "It seems that Naruto's performance and the intelligence information had him baffled. You are as insufferable as the Namikaze was." Sarutobi. Naruto tensed at the mention of his father, and Dewey's eyebrow raised. "Oh boy, that wasn't good. You'll find out that the will of fire is quite an influential ideology." Raiko waved his hand dismissively. "So what's the point of all this?" Sarutobi. "I don't know. If your people like you, my people don't like your people, and you don't trust us, let's keep the treaty and continue as we have. And I want there to be peace." Even Naruto flinched at the voice that escaped from the old leaf leader. The moments were few and far between when Hiruzen Sarutobi lost his temper, but when he did everything he experienced, he remembered. He sighed for almost the seventh time in this meeting and sat down again. "I apologize, Samurai Sanraj Dono." The samurai gave him a brief feeling and reluctantly did the same. "What would it cost you to believe me, Raikage Dono? I have to declare war to demand that my wishes be fulfilled." "Is that what you want to prove your temple against Konoha? You think we are weak?" "No. But when you come here," and "I apologize, Raikage Dono, but it wasn't over yet. I will give you a clear reminder, and I hope you listen to it. I am the cashier, but you know I have a limit of power. If you keep poking the sleeping bear, which is my people, there will only be one answer, although you may take it as a slight against the pride of your nation. I urge you to remember there has not been a shinobi war that Konoha has not won. You are old Aikido, and the Yondaime is dead. I am the fastest man in the world. Now I wonder how much your ninja would appreciate seeing what happens in there ranks when one who has that title goes up against them. Cashiers don't win wars, you know this is true. Don't forget about the essays." He laughed and leaned forward. "You have reason. Maybe I should look for your former student who ran away, huh?" Sarutobi. Naruto suddenly spoke. He scared Hokage-sama. That was the turning point. In an instant he was in front of the boy, just a fist away from his nose. He was looking at the boy blankly even when Sarutobi held a kunai on his kidney. "If this boy speaks one more time, you have no bargaining power here, Raikage Dono." "What is he, Yamanaka? Are you reading minds here?" Sarutobi. Hiruzen let out a soft laugh and shook his head. "There is no Yamanaka here, Raj Dono alone, an inspired shinobi who stays true to the will of fire. You're already training another successor. He seems a little young." Yusin nodded. Instead of disagreeing, he hadn't lied to himself. Naruto was a strong candidate for Yukage, but that was a long way off in the future, very far away. If he had anything to say about it, he had not been excited to come out of retirement, but he had lifted the weight of age off his shoulders. He would not allow his age to inhibit his decisions. He had to fight harder, be fiercer than ever if he wanted to keep Konohagakure safe. It was one of the few cases where Danzo actually approved of his choice. "Raj Dono, I think it's time to get to the heart of the matter. Let's talk about the terms that will encourage our two peoples to work together, and we will finally see each other as true allies. There should be no compromise between shinobi." Sarutobi. The Insufferable guy in front of him crossed his arms and frowned, but I guess I have no other choice, we will try to make this work, but Kumo will only keep this treaty, as long as his needs are respected as well, or until that we have the advantage was not said, but it was a step in the right direction. Yusen could work with this, he was pleased. Naruto watched some samurai practicing their swordsmanship. From a balcony the conversations had ceased for the day, and he was posted to keep an eye on the courtyard to protect Hokage. He liked being part of the Anbu, he belonged there, none of the others cared who he was. For the first time in his life, he felt like he really belonged and became a shinobi without going to the academy. He had always been afraid to go there and the other children would make fun of him every time Suji had taken him to the park in the past. Whenever Naruto was alone, the other children would tease him and insult him. Eventually Hiruzen found out, and they stopped going out during conventional times, but he had already decided that the boys were bad, except for the Hyuga girl Anat. She had been very nice, however, she still made him feel a little uncomfortable with all her insecurities. It was nothing against her, in fact he felt bad for her, but in people like her his empathy sometimes it could overwhelm, it could cause a physical reaction to make him sick. He had wandered around the village and had experienced thousands of emotions, and he discovered that if he didn't pay attention, he could easily overwhelm. Kurama helped a lot, he was always there to talk when it was too much for him. Kurama always apologized for doing that, empathy was so strong, and he always thanked the Biju for the incredible gift. Naruto saw Kurama as his best friend and felt very sorry for him. Every time they talked they could feel the other Kurama's emotions. His best friend just wanted to be free. It was something that Naruto couldn't give him without committing suicide. He had reflected on it once, but Kurama's reaction had been severe. I have dedicated a lot of time to you, boy, don't waste my time. You're going to ruin me. Naruto felt the truth. Kurama was afraid of losing Naruto, and he was really stuck with him for even thinking about killing himself. That meant that Kurama cared about him. It was like when Kakashi got really sad and guilty when he saw Naruto. It meant that he loved him. Naruto couldn't feel love or friendship, like he could feel hate, anger, pain or guilt. He had to learn each time he experienced them for himself. Sometimes it was difficult to understand them. It was easier to think of love as an absence of hate. People were full of bad emotions, and every time someone felt a positive emotion, it was like a hole that Naruto couldn't see. He could feel the edges of these holes, he knew they were there, he was just blind to them. However, he didn't blame his empathy. He didn't need to know when people were happy or loved him. That wouldn't protect him like knowing when they were lying. However, Kurama, he had a long conversation with him years ago when he assumed that love was just the absence of hate. Naruto still didn't understand what love really was, but it got warm in his chest when he was with any of his precious people. No, you should focus on your mission instead of getting lost in your memories. You're not even 6 years old, you're too young to remember. Naruto laughed softly as he looked around, more attentive to his duty. I know you can feel bored watching us in service. To Kurama also, I don't perceive anyone with the intention of harming Gijio from spying on him. I think we'll be fine, yet you shouldn't become complacent. They could be waiting just out of your reach with a long-range jutsu. Naruto-kun, I'm sure you take the protection of lockage very seriously. Jiji Kurama. Naruto could feel his friend's annoyance. I know how much this means to you, boy, that's what matters to me. Naruto assumed it was love and affection that coursed through him at Kurama's words and made him feel warm and safe. I know. Kakashi hummed slightly while looking at the reports of the current operations that the Sundaime had ordered before his departure. Things had looked bad in the months following the key attack, but things had calmed down more or less since then. However, for some reason that just put it to the most nervous Sundaime, Kakashi was sure that the Anbu had not received so many spy missions since the last Shinobi War. The ROT team was the spearhead of many of these operations, but with the inclusion of the Konoha agent in their ranks, they began to take different missions. Usually only 2 members of the team were sent. Rohel and Yamato are the current operatives that were deployed. Their last report had just been delivered by a crow. Kakashi had been sure that they would have been the pair to go investigate Kumo, but instead they had been tasked with investigating Iwa. Kakashi had some guesses as to why, but he was content not knowing for sure either way. Rather than worrying about the 2 members of the Ro team, his thoughts focused on the reports he had received from Jiraiya. The Toad Hermit had been out of the village for years and had never even met Naruto. He always asked about the boy, but Sarutobi always gave vague details and hinted that if Jiraiya wanted to know more, he should return. The hermit always responded with more questions, and sometimes that really frustrated Hokage Kakashi. Understood Salmon's position. It was the same mindset he was entrapped after Minato's death. He now knew what a mistake it had been, but he wasn't in a position to try and tell him or the spymaster himself. But if Team Ro was on a mission and ran into him, that could work whether the old hermit wanted it or not. That was all in the future, however. For now he had other matters to attend to, like keeping a closer eye on the police Uchiha and finding someone to infiltrate ROT. There was an incident where it appeared that a member of the Uchiha police had framed a merchant for murder. Apparently the Uchiha Member had massive debts and tried to bury them next to the man he owed them to. Uchiha police had denied his actions and arrested him when it came to light, but remained tight-lipped about the details of the case and refused to issue an apology on behalf of the force if it was allowed to get out of control. Well, the Uchiha were not known for keeping a cool head when it came to the rod issued. Seemed like the Hokage didn't take kindly to their Anbu commander being the target of an assassination attempt from within the village. Honestly, Kakashi wasn't too happy about it either, but when he opened the last Ichicha that had been included in Jireya's last report, he found that he could deal with it for now. If this last book made it all worth it, Naruto stood still next to his Hokage as the negotiations entered their fourth day on the Raikage. He had been stubborn on all fronts. It seemed as if each day he covered only one aspect of the treaty. He had not removed his mask, except in the sanctity of the Hokage's private suite. There was something interesting today in the shape of the Raikage's new bodyguard. It was a young man who carried an interesting amount of swords, and Naruto could feel emotions within him that were very similar to those Naruto himself had often felt, and he felt emotions of something else, something deep inside the man. The Raikage had brought a Jinchuriki, the Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails, or Yuki, as Kurama had informed him after the scene he had caused on the first day. He had been ordered to be discreet. Dairy seemed to be more perceptive than Iron, feared that the connection would be made between Minato Namikaze and his son Naruto, waited until he was asked to break before walking silently towards the much larger man. As he approached the Jinchuriki, the older man paused in his yura from his notebook. He seemed to be mumbling some sort of rhyme to himself. Kurama and Naruto had had many arguments in the past about the other Jinchuriki and the Biju. Kurama's brothers. Naruto had promised that he would try to find some way to save them. He ignored the guilt Kurama harbored for creating the situation in which Naruto would take on such a monumental task. The Biju were scattered all over the world, and as a shinobi, he didn't know when or if he would ever meet them. They were usually well hidden by their respective villages. So it was important that he took advantage of this opportunity. He walked towards Killer Bee because that was the name he had perceived through A's emotions, and raised a fist towards him. The shinobi on both sides watched as B hesitated before extending a fist and pressing it lightly against the hand offered by the Konoha agent. Naruto's eyes opened, and he marveled at seeing the eight tails before him. The Biju were huge and impressive. He would have been scared if he hadn't been so close to Kurama since the age of 2. That didn't mean he wasn't respectful. He bowed slightly to Yuki. Killer Bee while Kurama laughed behind him. "It's nice to meet you, Killer Bee-san." Yuki-san. The ox giant octopus scoffed and ignored him to look at Kurama. "You say my name to Amano Kurama without my permission. I see that your arrogance has not been tempered by time. Save your breath, Yuki. I can't lie to Naruto-kun. We are too linked, and I have given him a gift." Naruto silently absorbed the waves of regret, anger and pain that boiled simmering deep within. Yuki was different from Kurama. Kurama was passion. When angry it burned intensely and overwhelmingly. Yuki was more restrained. It was cold anger, analytical and patient. Naruto observed as Yuki lowered her face towards him. Most would consider it rude to read another human's mind. Naruto bowed once more. "I apologize, Yuyan, but I wasn't reading your mind." "Then you're not a Yamanaka. I'm glad I don't have to hit you. You're the keys Jinchuriki. Better be proud to know me." Killer Bee. Oh, Naruto laughed when the pair of Yuki and Killer Bee began to argue with each other. He could feel the anger of both of them towards the other, but it was a feeling born of friendship and connection. They really liked each other, just like Naruto and Kurama. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Beeson. My name is Naruto. I know we are not true allies yet, but we are brothers. We are not Jinchuriki. We have to stay united. I think I want to save the Biju, Beeson. I want them to be free and safe from Shinobi B." And Yuki blinked and stayed in shock at the young man's frankness, and Kurama sighed. However, Naruto did not hesitate. He had to show that he would back up his words. He knew the risks he was taking. His Hokage would not understand and could potentially put him in danger, but he had to take advantage of this opportunity. When Killer Bee smiled widely, Naruto didn't even have to use his empathy to understand that he had found a soulmate. "How old are you?" Daring Sanova this time. Bee was able to dodge the tentacle that was aiming to slap him on the head. "He's a child. Go watch your language." As the two continued, the smile from Naruto just grew, although it took a bittersweet tone. "Okay, Bean. I know you can't do much to help me. I can't do much either right now. Just if you see Yui-san or any other Jinchuriki, you could try to contact them. I'll do the same." Man a lot older leaned down and ruffled Naruto's hair. He was very affectionate, and Naruto found that he liked the attention. He liked the feelings of being. They were comforting, soft. His negative emotions were dulled. He was a good person, of course. "Naruto, I will keep this secret." Naruto smiled as he mindscape fading. He blinked at B the second after their fists collided. Stoic behind the mask, the Kumo ninja watched the interaction narrow in confusion. He smiled at what had happened and at the emotions he felt in those watching him. No one had any idea what had happened. That was okay. It would probably never work too much, but he had to try to unite the Jinchuriki. It made him feel good that he could finally put a face to it, to the name of one of his 8 brothers through fate. If there was one thing Naruto learned to treasure, it was a positive Emotion. Naruto smiled as he walked back to the village proper. The land of iron had been cold. He was not used to that climate, being more used to it, to the warmth of Konohagakure. It was still a great experience, and he loved seeing Lockage in action. The Raikage had been a scary man, but the old man had handled him easily enough. Being able to use his gifts to serve his village had also been everything what he had always wanted. The Sundaime had been quite pleased with his efforts, although he also pointed out that he needed to work. Naruto and Bor were also very pleased with his service, even going so far as to say that Weasel Senpai would be proud and happy that he was able to overcome his superiors' expectations. Not feeling any disappointment or regret from them was a blessing. He followed the Sundaime back to the tower. Hokage Bor and Kat had disappeared towards the Anbu headquarters to report to Kakashi. Naruto had managed to discern quite a bit of information along negotiations, and they would add it to their files. For future reference, Naruto would normally have gone with them if he had been a normal Anbu agent. He had a different base assigned to them, which is why he walked calmly through the busiest district of the village with their leader. Was the easiest way to use his power to control the population in order to determine any new developments that might have occurred while the Hokage was away. Probably wouldn't pick up any hidden shinobi news, but it was wise to cast a net and see what Naruto could catch. Most of the villagers were fine and happy, although he was bombarded with more individual problems. Despised lovers, angry family members, greedy businessmen and annoying children were the loudest signals he received. There were many holes and gaps that he could feel, so most of the villagers, they were happy. However, as he passed by more people, an undercurrent of fear began to become more and more evident among all the civilians. Some scandal had happened, and also recently when Uchiha patrol passed by, the feelings increased, and Naruto felt in the Uchiha's feelings of indignation, wounded pride and injustice could be seen mocking those they had sworn to serve, and the fires of distrust were slowly kindling in the hearts of the villagers. This was not good. He and the Hokage slowly made their way towards the Hokage tower. And from the outside Naruto seemed fine. Inside worry took over his heart, and Kurama stayed silent as he tried to deal with the fact that something was very wrong with the Uchiha police. He needed to talk to Itachi. Itachi watched as the envoy of Kuno was approaching Hakure's village. He and Yamato had ventured deep into Iwa and had only encountered an Iwa patrol once. Fortunately, their disguises had seen them through inspection and had withstood enemy scrutiny. His orders had been to intercept information from Kumo's delegation and make a copy of it. If Kumo and Iwa started talking behind the scenes, the Hokage wanted to know what was being put on the table. He couldn't just trust Kumo to work with them, and was doing everything he could to force the alliance to stay. Itachi appreciated the strategy. He was very political, and of the two, it would only work against Aono, who was too clever to try to outwit the fence's Sider, who had faced Mater Uchiha. He would be intimidated by political maneuvering. Itachi found in the political arena a much better alternative than the battlefield. He had experienced combat during the Third Shinobi War. The thought of his brother Naruto facing those difficulties made his heart grow cold. They were the reason. Anbu had just arrived when his father spoke to him about how he should try to become the Hokage. It was time for Anya to wear the hat and take up the mantle of village leader. Tensions with her clan and the rest of the village had risen after the Kyuubi attack, and her father's arrogance and pride were not helping matters. However, things were heating up recently with some scandals with the Uchiha police force, and Itachi was starting to worry about his clan's overreaction. The tensions still weren't too high, though it would only be a matter of time before things would escalate. Hopefully the problems could be resolved peacefully. With the help of Naruto, he was sure that things would not get too out of control. The boys' gift would be incredibly useful in maintaining peace and security. The last thing Itachi wanted was for his clan to become a danger to his village. Will of fire burned deep within him, and he did not want to see it extinguished by the pride of his clan or his father. Wrapped in his thoughts, he almost missed that Yamato appeared at his side. Commodore J. Taichu, there is an Iwa patrol heading towards us. We should leave. Itachi nodded and jumped off the cliff behind them. It was time to go home. Sarutobi was smoking his pipe while Konoha was behind him. Karumura and Danzo stood in front of him. They were meeting about the summit and also exchanging comments on the direction of the latest policies of the town. Was an old and familiar game between him and Danzo, and it gave a sense of normality to his. Naruto seemed very anxious, and that was a big red flag. The boy's ability made him an emotional barometer, and it seemed something was brewing inside the village itself. As the meeting progressed, Konoha continued looking at Danzo. Eventually, Danzo caught his attention and returned his gaze. Sarutobi dismissed his advisors and was surprised when the young Uzumaki approached Danzo. "Advisor, Shimura-san. Can I talk to you?" Rot leader paused for a second, looking towards Lockage before nodding. Naruto turned and bowed before walking with his old friend and rival. It didn't bode well. He wasn't happy. 7-year-old Naruto Uzumaki was sitting in his own apartment, practicing it. Seal had moved from the Sarutobi compound a year ago, after resentment from the civilian sector began to rise. Tension had been building in Konoha for years, and with the escalating distrust between the town and the Uchiha, a select few had stepped in. Become very vocal about their dislike for the demon brat, not that anyone has ever said that in public that is, but when Naruto realized that his adoptive family had been suffering for their loyalty to him, he moved out on his own accord and had tried to dissay it, and even Amma had tried to convince him to stay. It wasn't said throughout the village, but it was widely known that the Naruto clan was fiercely protective of the Jinchuriki, and he of them, even those who looked down on Naruto, wouldn't speak ill of the Sarutobi in his face. The villagers had learned that lesson a long time ago. He was an anomaly in the village. Rumors of his strange behavior had circulated years ago, and now Naruto had learned to act in a more socially acceptable manner. Naruto was seen quite frequently during the day throughout the town, going for a walk, buying groceries, things like that. Little did anyone know of the true intention of their public companies being rejected was the perfect cover for a spy who analyzed the emotions of everyone he encountered. Naruto had recovered invaluable data for the cashier, and the whole town was under scrutiny, and none of them knew well that wasn't entirely true. He had to be careful not to scrutinize any Yamanaka too deeply. Inoichi had burst into Hokage's office a few months ago, warning him that a shinobi had infiltrated the village and was investigating people's minds. It was embarrassing to have been caught by him and the Hokage in a shinobi village. Nothing generated more distrust than being caught spying on your own subjects. Fortunately for Inoichi had caught up, and he had made up a story about some new counter-espionage training, which was fine, but every now and then a Yamanaka would try to pinpoint his location, and he would have to evade them for a handful of hours. The last one had been quite persistent and almost chased him for an entire day. Apparently the training was doing wonders with Yamanaka's abilities, but it was still annoying for Naruto. While Naruto walked during the day, the agent Konoha appeared at night. Thanks to the tensions between the Uchiha and the Hokage, Hyuga had been appointed as mediators between the two parties. Itachi, spy for the council, and Naruto would accompany him to the Uchiha compound and read what he could of the emotions of the meetings. Things had gotten progressively worse. The Uchiha were entertaining thoughts of rebellion. Of all the plans they could have come up with, they had to decide on the most suicide. Kurama era, of the opinion that Uchiha was the only choice that would make Uchiha the worst. His opinions on Uchiha had not changed much over the years. However, he had come to accept Itachi into Naruto's life. Naruto's training had also intensified. The 7 years he deserved his status as a Anbu agent. That being said, this was still a long way from Keikyo's level. Itachi had been raised in the models established during the Second and Third Great Shinobi Wars. Kakashi and Itachi had even put him on simulated missions similar to those they had performed on their own tours of duty. Naruto rarely disappoints. His performance at the Cannabis Bridge exercise had made Kakashi's guilt and pain lessen until Kakashi was unnoticed for weeks. Kurama said that meant Kakashi had been proud. The Hokage, who had given Naruto his final sealing mission, had apparently reached a stopping point in their training, at least for a while. The Hokage insisted that Naruto not be pushed too hard, that his progress was outstanding, but he wanted his young warrior to he would take some time to reflect and perfect his techniques. Naruto understood the reasoning. His body had just begun to grow, and his taijutsu would change as his body grew. His chakra would also do so, and only constant control exercises would maintain the levels of control at which he had grown. He had gotten used to it, therefore the Hokage had taken advantage of this time to advance his learning in new areas and paths. Sealing was the first of his new subjects and also the hardest. Naruto enjoyed it a lot. It was relaxing and felt natural. He knew that his parents had been sealing prodigies, and practicing the art made him feel closer to them. That alone was enough for him to become obsessed with the art. After just a week of instruction, he had also spent more time at Hokage's side as Agent Konoha, learning from observing everything. Mission assignments, council meetings, advisor meetings, the paperwork. He handled the village, and had even dedicated himself to transcribing correspondence. Private Hokage, the young shinobi, did everything he could to make his leader and grandfather figure proud, made his own pride felt. Warm and strong, it was quite an addictive emotion. Naruto looked up to see Itachi sitting on his windowsill, tense and emotionally harassed. He didn't usually see his mentor like this, and immediately stood up. Itachi-sensei, what, get ready, we have to go now, get your mask. Naruto's body went into autopilot as it had been trained as he grabbed the stack of explosive notes he had just finished creating and grabbed the mask that was on his hip. It was a cold professionalism that washed over him as he continued without words. The example of his superior went out the window. And crossed the town. They left the town, they passed the wall, and headed towards the river to the east. He didn't know if it was another simulated or real mission, but either way it didn't matter, he would do what they had to do there. And for half an hour before Itachi suddenly stopped. Naruto stopped next to him and waited in silence for his mentor's words. The morning sun was just beginning to penetrate through the upper branches of the trees, but he did not feel comfort for the light. Something was terribly wrong. My friend Shisui is in trouble. I think Rod is after him. I'm sorry to ask for your help, but I can't trust anyone else if there are fights. I don't want you to get involved, but take Shisui and go. Understand? Naruto suppressed his instinctive refusal. He buried his demand to fight alongside his master, his brother, and nodded. If he wanted to help with anything, he had to follow the rules. He had promised that he would never lie to Itachi again. He would keep that promise. Itachi turned and left again when they approached. Of course, Itachi motioned for Naruto to step aside, and he obeyed. It was evident that a fight had recently broken out here. The atmosphere clearly showed signs of intense jutsu compensation. Burn marks and cuts on the trees that looked like chakra marks. The nature of the wind, Shisui and Danzo himself, that was not a good sign. There were other additional combatant markers, but that made sense. Danzo never traveled alone. Slowly, he made his way along the bottom of the gorge closer to the river. He could sense Itachi above talking to someone more. It could only be Shisui. He couldn't hear them, but his empathy was enough for him to understand the essence of what was happening. Danzo had believed that Shisui using his Sharingan to stop the blow was a waste. Danzo had stolen something of great value, one of the eyes of Shisui. Naruto couldn't believe that a dojutsu could be so coveted before remembering Madara's stories, along with the rumors that a Sharingan could control the Biju, a rumor that Kurama had reluctantly verified. In fact, the Kyuubi attack was orchestrated by an Uchiha, but not one who was in the Shisui village. Continued, and Naruto felt his heart fall for Itachi. The blow would not stop. Rot was the conflict involved was imminent. Now he felt Itachi's bottomless pain grow as Shisui turned away from him and urged him to kill him. Naruto wasn't fast enough. He couldn't move or do anything before the part of Itachi that Naruto always admired. The part that was selfless and served the village before everything and anything. He urged him forward until Shisui was unconscious and falling into the gorge. Naruto jumped off the wall and caught the body before it could land on the rocks below. He quickly carried the body to Itachi. When he saw his brother, his older brother who had always protected him, saw sadness in his eyes, sadness that he had only felt deep in Uchiha, and as his eyes slowly changed from the strange way they had been, he saw Itachi crying for the first time. Who knew him? The Uchiha quickly walked away from Naruto and stood up. Take care of the body. Kano-kun deserves to be found by his family. I will inform Hokage. He left before Naruto could say anything, before he could try to comfort him, before he could tell him about the spark of life that was still inside Shisui's chest. Uchiha felt conflicted. It would be a lie to save Shisui. He had the right to risk everything to save this man. It was selfish if he only debated it because of what it would mean for Itachi, not because above all, Uchiha was a leaf shinobi. Plus he had been ordered to take care of the body. He would do everything in his power to make it happen. Before Kurama could finish his question, a slow trickle of the Kirby's chakra left his hands and entered his body. The dying man's body raw and inefficient without Naruto to guide him, but he still had to learn medical ninjutsu. He alone couldn't save Shisui's life, but he knew someone who could. Kabuto was hard at work, filing the paperwork of all the patients he had seen that morning, when a faint smell wafted from the hallway. One of the first things she had gained when working under Orochimaru were crafts and rituals that could enhance the senses. A person relied on. Miss Orman had lately become quite familiar with food. Apparently it was for he as a brown-haired girl rapped her knuckle on the open door of his office and greeted him. Hello Kabuto, I have your order of my Orman. He smiled and thanked her, as if he had ordered it himself and had paid for the meal, while she was walking away quickly grabbing a styrofoam bowl and leaving her work as it was. She had been summoned. Her new leader finally had a use for him. Kabuto had provided weekly reports to the young shinobi, but she wondered when he would first be called to serve beyond. As soon as he headed to a nearby park that had a play structure with dozens of little children screaming and playing around it. The children were some of the best camouflage. His innocence tended to bleed into the surroundings that they frequented. No one noticed when he passed by a statue and didn't appear on the other side. After all, the secret entrances didn't always have to be conspicuous. The walk down the hallway wasn't very long. It used to be covered in dust, but after Naruto showed interest in using the hideout, they renewed it. Orochimaru had dozens of bases spread across Konoha before he fled, and the masses only knew about a few. He knew most of them. Kabuto knew them all. Naruto had been excited to learn of the 3 bases that were still. They had not been found, even by the Akatsuki. They were quite small. But privacy is something that could never be priced high enough, especially within a shinobi village. When he entered, he expected to see his master. He had not anticipated a naked and bleeding body and from the tables, surgical instruments prepared Naruto-sama, you didn't have to give me a gift. He enjoyed the annoyance that his joke seemed to inspire in the young shinobi. Kabuto-kun, this is Uchiha Shisui. I need you to save him please. Kabuto walked towards the fallen Uchiha and looked at him. There were questions on his tongue, but the body would answer some of them. He saw common lacerations with finely channeled wind chakra, internal bleeding, bruises that were common with broken ribs, 2 eyes missing. I must confess, Naruto-sama, there is not much left of a body. It is important that know that you want me to simply preserve his life to gain information or save him completely. The way the boy's eyes darkened with anger, sent a shiver through his back, knew it before the boy opened his mouth, realizing it. Naruto paused, and then sighed. Why are you making fun of me? It's not nice, Sui. He's a true shinobi of the leaf, I won't let him die. The boy had found a great opportunity. Apparently Kabuto had already been informed of the situation with the Uchiha. Shisui had been entrusted with the task of spying on Itachi, but he had defected to the village just like the Uchiha prodigy. Even if his life was saved at this moment, his life in the light of Konoha was over. The Uchiha would never accept him, and Danzo wouldn't let him live. Even Lockage would be hard-pressed to trust him. He had gotten in too deep. Kabuto washed his hands and started his work. I'll take care of here, Naruto-sama. I will notify you when the operation is complete. The boy nodded and hugged him from behind. Thank you, Kabuto-kun, thank you. Kabuto watched the young Uzumaki leave, and at that moment, he discovered that his loyalty had been cemented. Any doubts he had about serving the boy had vanished into ashes, and in its place, an immovable loyalty, the will of fire rekindled and burning as strong as the sun in that moment. He wished that the boy could have felt the emotion that had inspired him. As the moment passed, he set out to save the life of Oniya. Shizu Uchiha did not know it yet, but he owed his life to young Naruto Uzumaki. It was a fact. If the boy had not been there, Uchiha's body would have appeared down the river dead a long time ago. Kabuto would make sure to see that payday alone would not be enough. To serve the boy, they would need more soldiers for whatever cause he pursued. Naruto. Kakashi waited silently as the Anbu squad leaders gave their reports. The tension that had been brewing in the village after the Kyuubi incident had never been worse. Fights broke out among the civilians and the Uchiha police force, and there were casualties on both sides. The other clan saw the signs and had ostracized the Uchiha and further fanned the flames of tensions. More Hyuga were being requested for jobs from Uchiha's longtime favorite clients. The Uchiha had not been invited to Daimur's palace for a wedding for Daimur's cousin in a long time, and the civil council had approved business practices that put an end to Uchiha's business. The entire town was turning against them. The Uchiha were not the only threat to the Uchiha. The village at the time. Kakashi knew that periods of civil unrest were the perfect time for saboteur and espionage. You had been working tirelessly to mitigate any outside influence in their current state of crisis. Kumagakure had increased correspondence with Iwagakure since the treaty, and reports claimed that Kurigakure was slowly degrading into a civil war due to the blood purge instilled by Yonda M. Mizukage. Relations with Sunagakure had slowed and cooled when Dame Yuan suddenly began sending more jobs to Konoha. The big five nations were slowly reaching a very dangerous point. If the situation in Konoha did not stabilize soon, he would not be surprised if a fourth great shinobi war began. He would do everything he could to minimize that possibility. The Uchiha needed to be settled. Unfortunately, the Hokage was slowly losing hope of a peaceful resolution. Rumors spread that Shisui Uchiha had disappeared. Apparently the Uchiha elders had tasked him with notifying Itachi, and now believed that the prodigy was a spy. Although they were not wrong, it ruined any chance the Hokage had of using Itachi peacefully. The agent Kono had been quite helpful in discovering that intelligence. He was also very helpful in identifying the force that had provided more evidence of Shisui's death in the wake of the elder Uchiha. Danzo had become more active than he had been in almost a decade. Uchiha, Danzo, Kumagakure, Iwagakure, Kurigakure, Sunagakure. The town had to be aware of all possible threats. Even those who had kept quiet, like Orochimaru the Konoha agent, had somehow discovered some of Snake Sannin's spies, and although the Hokage had attributed it to his empathy, Kakashi suspected there was more to it than that. However, he had no problem allowing his younger brother his secrets. He had more than earned the right to keep it. Naruto had exceeded all his expectations, and yet he was worried anyway. Naruto was the future of Konoha, a very promising candidate for the title of Hokage. His skill as a shinobi was being put to wonderful use. It was his social skills that worried Kakashi. He had noticed in conversations that Naruto was slowly beginning to focus more on the negative aspects of people he didn't know. Kakashi blamed I gave empathy. It made it difficult for the boy to see the good in people, in all people, but he couldn't be blamed for it. How could you believe in something when everything you saw was the complete opposite? Well, the worries of the village plagued his mind, so did the worries by young Uzumaki. What would happen if Naruto ever lost faith in the townspeople? If he decided that the people of Konoha were too twisted and cruel, that they didn't deserve his protection? May be a stretch, but it was important to identify the worst case scenarios in his line of work. If he was being honest with himself, the worst case scenario for Konoha would see him side with Naruto against them. Because if the boy ever really decided he was better off without the village, then how could Kakashi deny his logic? How could the rule breakers abandon him? They were trash. Those who abandoned their friends were worse than trash. But Naruto was family. Kakashi had turned his back on his family. Once his father didn't have it in him to make that mistake again. Hopefully he could avoid that possibility. And find some way to nurture Naruto's humanity. Of course, that would have to be after Kakashi took care of the power-hungry ninja villages who would see their village burn. He would see them all beaten and bloodied. It wasn't in Yazuka, but it was an attack. The attacks of yesteryear were known for his determination to protect his clan, his family. Kakashi would remind all the elemental nations who exactly the attacks were, and he had to do it. Naruto was in the safe house, watching Kabuto take care of the sleeping Shisui. The Uchiha was at peace, thanks to the sedative. Yes, if it weren't for that, he would have already woken up. Naruto had asked Kabuto to keep him locked up a little longer to plan what to do with him. He had just returned with some food for the two of them and had started eating while thinking, but Kun, how long will it take? Rehab? The doctor shrugged and cleaned his glasses. It's hard to say. Naruto-sama, his injuries were quite extensive and the loss of his eyes will delay any progress in combat for a fairly considerable amount of time. The psychological damage, well, I don't know how bad. Naruto nodded as he ate his sandwich. What should we do with it? The gray-haired spy turned and looked at him. That's a trick question. What do you want? What are you working for? I want to be the cashier. Naruto pouted while Kabuto laughed. What do I do? Believe it. That's not it. Enough for you two. It's only part of what you want. I can tell you want more than a hat and a figurehead position. Naruto blinked. The answer had been so honest. It made him think about what he wanted, and he remembered his meeting with B. What he said about the Jinchuriki. I want to save the Biju. Naruto, you don't have to. Ignoring Kurama, Naruto's eyes hardened and he nodded towards Kabuto. I want to save the Biju. Naruto couldn't help but be impressed by the smile that appeared on Kabuto's face. The man wasn't afraid, not at all, and Naruto knew the weight of what he had just declared. Now that is a worthy goal. You will need influence outside of Konoha to achieve it. You will need agents and allies both inside and outside the village. If you are discovered, you will be labeled a traitor and to lie. The Hokage had thought long and hard about it. The shinobi system as a whole was responsible for the treatment of the Biju and would have to be uprooted and stem. It was a disgusting balance of financial and martial domination, and only Aang generated hatred and bloodshed. If it weren't for those close to him would have believed that every human being was implicit in his continuing evil within. Every man, woman, and could not even cloud his senses. At times his upbringing led him to believe that such a change would require monumental action. A great catalyst moving slowly would allow approaches more pacifists. But he only had one life to do what three great shinobi wars could not achieve: peace. He would be the one to guide the world towards its next great step towards true peace, united under one flag, one people, one paradise for all being sentience, where Biju and humans could live side by side. Becoming a box was the first logical step. Well, you will still have to respond to the damage. I don't know where you're trying to take me, and I understand that's something we can talk about in the future. Naruto smiled and handed him an AC Kabuto sandwich. For now let's just eat and then we can decide again on Uchiha's fate. Blind man is the only Uchiha good boy. A blind man. Naruto let out a mental snort as he shook his head. Are you forgetting about Itachi? Kurama. Itachi sighed as Naruto once again failed to hit him with his kunai. You should be doing better than this, Naruto-kun. Your training may have been suspended, but he clearly doesn't like it. You're giving this fight your full attention. Naruto jade to breathe as he sat where he had been. Sorry. Itachi-senpai closed his eyes and lay down on the ground. A cool breeze blew through the trees, rustling the leaves for a while. That was the only one sound. Then Itachi sat next to him. Naruto-kun, I think you have something you want to talk about. It's been worrying you all day. I don't want to lose you. Itachi looked at his young protege and smiled softly. You know I can't promise that you'll never lose me. We are shinobi. Naruto-kun, I already know. But with the Uchiha eye alone. Before he could say anything else, Itachi decided to stop him by running his hand through the boy's hair. You are younger than me. When I first joined the Anbu you remind me of myself in many ways, but I don't think I can ever come close to how noble and honorable you are. I want you to promise me that you will leave the Uchiha clan to me. I know what a promise means to you. I need you to do this for me. He wasn't surprised when the boy fell silent and turned away. He refused to meet his eyes. His own smile widened in response. We can't promise things we know we can't do. I know you have your mind set on helping, but Agent Konoha can't help me when the time comes. Itachi saw the boy's eyes. They opened in fear when he finally felt the guilt that Itachi had hidden deep within himself. He sat down and slammed his fist into Itachi's chest. No, you can't. I won't let you. I'll stop you. It has to be done. Naruto-kun, it's okay. I've taught you everything I can. It's up to you now to grow strong on your own initiative. No, 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 you can't. You just can't just leave me. Itachi had seen Naruto cry many times, but he believed this was the first time he had made the boy cry. The Uzumaki clung to him and hugged him tightly. I'll be lost without you. He pulled him closer and rested his chin on his Head, I know it's scary, but you won't be alone, now you're strong, you have everything you need to be a great shinobi I believe in, and I need you to trust me, I must do this, save my brother, can you take care of him for me when I'm gone, can you take care of Sasuke, the blonde-haired boy? Looked at him with tears streaming down his face and nodded slowly. You have to promise that you will come back one day. You have to promise that you will try. The boy's fingers began to tear at his clothes in desperation. And even though he knew he shouldn't do it, he felt that the words were coming out of his mouth before he could stop them. I promise Naruto, I promise I'll try. You did what Yusin growled softly at his advisors as they sat in front of him. Amura and Karu couldn't help the tension they experienced from his outburst, but Danzo, he seemed bewildered. I ordered the go-ahead for the operation. Itachi will fulfill his ver as Lenin and eradicate the Uchiha in a single night quickly and painlessly and without risk of collateral damage, without civilian losses. We will lose the reputation of the Uchiha clan, but it is imperative that we can push. That was not your decision, Danzo. I am the cashier, and I had let the situation get out of control. Danzo looked back at him with the same anger. Your drive and strength have been rekindled in recent years, but your heart is still too soft and gone their way, and the Uchiha are stubborn. Fool, you would watch our enemies destroy us, because you can't bear to make the difficult decision. Finding peace is the difficult decision. Danzo, you are taking the easy way. The destruction of an entire clan is unprecedented. I will not be the Hokage who ordered the death of a clan founder. Danzo leaned back. You will not be remembered as such. Either anyone else would have been confused by the words of, but Hiruzen knew his old friend well enough to immediately understand what he meant. How do you dare? Even he couldn't stop his muscles from tensing at the killing intent. They aimed at each other. He slid a hand forward and an Anbu guard left the room. To dissuade the surrounding shinobi from believing that the Hokage was being attacked, he took a moment to take a breath and sat back down with sad eyes. This was the ugly side of leading a town. He had done his best to lead honorably and fairly, to fight for peace and transparency. He had kept Danzo close, even ignoring his actions in the shadows sometimes, if only out of respect for the bond the two had. It was a mistake. This was just another case where his inaction would haunt him, mocking him for his mistakes, condemning a boy who loves his family to not only kill his entire clan, but to take on the mantle of a dishonest terrorist, disavow his actions, label him a traitor. I ask a shinobi to do his duty for the village he loves above all else. Hiruzen could not see any sign of regret in his old friend's eyes. He saw a tense calm and nervousness. Hiruzen, he was then very aware that Naruto was not his side, had gotten used to the perspicacious. It had been noticed that it wasn't necessary for the boy to attend every meeting, but this was the first time in a long time that he wasn't there for a meeting with Danzo. A quick glance showed that Amura and Kor were also there. Nervous not of a fight but of discovery, Hiruzen felt his heart stop and turned to the windows in panic, looking desperately over his village as the sun slowly set. It was so peaceful, so calm. Yes, Sarutobi must be done tonight. Sasuke stopped in front of the gates to the compound. Uchiha confused. Something was wrong. The gates were left slightly open and the compound was silent. The Uchiha were not the most exuberant of people, and even Sasuke knew that recently things had been strange within their clan, but this was not right. Something he was walking badly and entered the complex and gasped when the smell of blood filled his nose. His eyes filled with tears when he saw bodies lying in the street. Everything became a blur when he tripped over the nearest body and turned it over to reveal one of them. His neighbor's. The old man's neck had been cut to the bone, and he recoiled when one of the neck tendons came off the dead man's neck and fell onto his hand. Sasuke fell back and tried to catch his breath. Before stopping, he looked down the street towards his house, and he saw the lights flashing. Inside he ran. Sasuke arrived home and heard sobbing slowly. He climbed the stairs. The sounds from his parents' room made his skin grow cold, and his chest tightened. The air. He evaded his attempts to regain his senses. Breath until he opened the door and saw his brother standing next to his bleeding parents, his sword ready to execute his mother. Itachi looked and fixed his gaze on his Sasuke, could only look in horror at his brother's twisted Sharingan that was spilling tears of blood. His brother is expressionless as his Sharingan, his wrong evil Sharingan, twisted and turned, and suddenly he found himself in a world of negative light. The shadows were bright white, and what would be light was dark black. He could still see everything, and he could only sob as he watched his brother massacre his entire clan. Odd way you could hope to kill me. Aim no Nan. Sasuke was interrupted when Itachi stabbed his chest with his sword. So you will still be the helpless child who watched his parents suddenly die. The world he was focused again, and Sasuke watched as his surroundings slowly cleared. He heard his mother yell at him to look away. He watched as his father tried to use a jutsu before being slammed into the ground. He watched his brother move in for the kill. He watched as a strange Anbu shorter than him burst through the window and hit his brother. Itachi languidly stepped back and readied his sword. Then the Hokage realized my plan. Of course I would send you Konoha. You are the only one who would have a chance to stop me. Itachi Uchiha, you are accused of betrayal, murder, and crimes against a founding clan of Konoha. Surrender. Sasuke longed for his brother to drop his sword so that he would stop this return to being the brother he loved, who taught him how to use his shuriken kunai. He was proud Of him when his father was disappointed returned to become sewer, and not this monster. His brother cried more tears of blood as he ran towards the lone Anbu who tried to stop him. He wanted this madness to end. He wanted his brother back. Naruto felt nothing as he countered Itachi's sword with his kunai no. He allowed himself to feel the emotions that were straining his training and willpower. His anger at being forced to fight the man he saw and loved as an older brother was channeled into his punches, and in truth it was not Itachi he was fighting, but rather Itachi. The world. His love for the Uchiha kept his heart in a tight fist and clenched painfully, even as he coldly aimed his own murderous intent at him. His loneliness screamed deafeningly as he continually felt the deep depression Itachi sank deeper into each time. Blows sent painful blows to his arms as their swords connected, and it was the only thing Naruto could do to hit harder and faster the pain. It was the only thing punishing him at that moment. This was the greatest test the universe could have devised for him. Against him there was no scenario in which Naruto wouldn't lose something of incredible value. He was very lucky to have the mental maturity to channel any hopelessness or desperation into the fight, buried his heart, and became the weapon for which was trained. He somersaulted through the air, grabbing Sasuke by the neck and dragging him out of reach as a fireball hit the ground and Sasuke screamed. As the heat exploded and burned both of them, Naruto was unfazed by the pain, as he was too busy deflecting the knives his mentor was sending toward Sasuke with terrifying precision. Kurama. Naruto mentally yelled at his closest ally. The fox quickly flooded Naruto's body with a tail of chakra, and Naruto moved forward, even as he counted in his head. Itachi dodged his burst of blows with liquid grace. Before his red eyes glowed as their eyes looked at each other, the genjutsu he had been trapped in was broken almost instantly by Kurama, although that instant of his chakra fluctuating was all Itachi needed. The move and throw Naruto against the side of the building. Naruto coughed and slowly broke free as he watched Itachi move towards his bleeding mother. The clan house was slowly burning down, and Sasuke stood shaking between his older brother and his beaten and broken parents. Naruto growled as he felt his limbs being flooded with Kurama's chakra once again. He had no hope of defeating Itachi. All he could do was waste time. He knew as he rushed towards Adam that even with a single tail of Bijir chakra deal to stop Itachi was like trying to move a mountain with a single earth dragon jutsu, an effort in futility. Yet he was the only one between the extinction of the Uchiha clan, and Itachi barely managed to get in front of Sasuke and kick him. Forcing Itachi to taking a step back, he pushed towards Adam, kicking and punching, trying to maintain his momentum with everything he had. He was forced to rely on his enhanced healing powers as Itachi inflicted wound after wound. Unable to fight defensively, he could only minimize the damage and leave the smallest openings possible. Itachi slashed his arm once more, and Naruto gritted his teeth. Itachi lunged forward in an attempt to reverse the momentum, and Naruto backed away before throwing a handful of seals into the air. Itachi only had a moment before he noticed. Explosives and the lightning seals ignited the force of the explosion, sent them both backwards, and damaged the structural integrity of the building. Naruto threw kuna and shuriken, as he had been taught, as efficiently as he could, at the most likely routes his opponent would try to take to get there. He heard the sound of metal clashing to the left and turned to look at his enemy before feeling the jolt of his chakra fluctuating to dispel the genjutsu. He couldn't even think as his body jerked to the side to dodge his attack. Blind spot that felt like it was coming into his bones. He didn't move fast enough to dodge the blast of fire that hit where he had been standing less than a second ago, but he forced his burning, smoking body to move. He could feel his skin cracking and falling from the force with which he turned to face Itachi, only to discover that 3 different copies of his sensei were approaching him. He roared and ran to meet them head-on, exchanging blows and dispelling one. Before being thrown by he gasped and fell on his back. His breath was knocked from his lungs. Then he saw 2 kunai go through his hands and stuck into the floorboards. He felt the blades cut right between his bones, and his muscles shook as the blade tore tendons and muscles. He still screamed, and his vision went white with pain. He could feel his body trying to heal around the wounds, and the burn of his cells unable to regenerate was worse than the initial pain itself. The tears were streaming down his face when even then he felt the absolute despair around him. Sasuke's fear of his own brother, Mikoto's fear of waking up from seeing his eldest son kill his youngest son, and Itachi's absolute despair at the pain he had inflicted on Naruto and what was about to happen. To face his brother, Sasuke closed his eyes and screamed when Itachi swung his sword at his defenseless mother. At the last moment, Hyuga threw himself in front of his wife in a last act of love and sacrifice. The patriarch Uchiha whispered something to his eldest son, but Naruto couldn't hear it. All the negative feelings and pain became too much for him. He roared once more and tore his hands forward, breaking it from his palms, and ran towards Itachi. The blood pouring from his hands and the force of his running kept the flesh apart. Separated that he was only lengthening the regeneration period, his healing was powerful, but even he had limits. Fortunately, it seemed that the movement had caught even Itachi off balance, and before he could walk away, his dying father Ndo had grabbed him tightly. Naruto crashed into Itachi's side and threw him away from his family. The fire had gotten out of control, and the ceiling began to collapse. Naruto kept his senses alert. As the smoke clouded his vision, he could hear Sasuke crying and shaking to his father behind him as his mother struggled to carry him to safety. Beyond the smoke, he saw shapes moving and prepared his stance. His hands had come back together, but there was no skin, just those and muscles moving in the clawed stance of the fist-stem monkey. The shapes stopped before they seemed to change and disappear. He stood still, and suddenly they came back. He jumped into action, jumping through the smoke and slashed at the nearest figure, only to stop at the last second when he met mask to mask with Konoha Bore. Stand down. Naruto took a step back and silently checked the identity of the newcomer. He nodded when he was satisfied that they were not imposters and looked at the survivors of Itachi's family. Need help, you two, boy your hands. Naruto jumped out of the building before he was able to hear the last of the order, and he headed to the nearby roof. His hand slowly grew back into his skin. The nerves burned as if they had been dipped in acid. The pain swirled. Blomqvist from the village and Uchiha's trauma he could feel. Itachi left the village, then left. There were a few seconds of peace before Naruto realized he had been crying. The tears had run down his mask and made paths through the blood and grime. He felt Cat behind him looking at him in silence. He closed his eyes and forced himself to stop crying, but the tears didn't stop. Konoha, his eyes opened at his voice, and he stopped channeling the chakra towards his empathy. As his rank decreased, he discovered that the tears also stopped. That didn't happen. It meant that his heart was less broken. Come on, Cat. I felt intruders trying to get a Sharingan. It seems that there are still some conspirators within the village. Yusin, free us. This makes no sense. Sarutobi did not move from the window. Minutes after realizing the plot that had been hatched under their noses, reports had come in that the Uchiha clan had been almost completely sacrificial. It was quite impressive in a truly horrible way. It had been too clean. Not only was the clan compound attacked, but also the Uchiha police headquarters. Itachi was skillful. But he couldn't have done it alone. He commanded silence. The 4 village elders had fought during the 3 shinobi wars, and this presence would have given them pause. Even in their prime, a boy slowly opened the door with tears dripping down his Anbu mask, silently walked past Kurama, and left a handful of bloody and splintered masks on the table in front of Danzo. The two looked at each other in silence, and it was then when the Hokage turned around. Only then did he break his silence. As I became Hokage, Danzo allowed you to form Rod in an attempt to cover my defects, my weakness, my inability to put the village before my conscience. I have turned a blind eye to your movements, to the crimes you have committed against the village itself. No more. Rod is done. Danzo clenched his teeth, but before he could respond, the empty stare Agent Konoha stopped him. The boy was still shedding tears, and Danzo would have been disgusted by the pathetic display of emotion if it hadn't disturbed him in some way. 15. That's how many underground bunkers you have. You have scrolls hidden around the village that contain supplies and classified documents in 47 locations. You have agents within every major clan, including the Sarutobi. You have illegal dealings with every major criminal syndicate. You are guilty of treason. Dozens of times you ordered agents to steal your Sharingan to go along with the one you stole from Shisui Uchiha. You take orphans and you pair them while you train them. You force them to kill their partner for graduation training. You have worked with Anzo Olamander, and you are still in contact with Orochimaru from Sannin. You deny something. Danzo moved his eyes calmly to look at his rival. Long-term and friend, once I did what I did for Konoha. You still need me, Yusin. We don't need Rod. I won't deny it yet, no, but you have become too bitter, jaded and stubborn. You have put your own interests before the interests of the village. Don't try to argue. The Karu and Amura remained silent while Danzo looked between the Hokage and his protege. This had not been a scenario for Ra, the one who was prepared. Still, your pupil has been well trained. Sarutobi, I am impressed. The Konoha agent did not respond. The tears were still slowly falling down his mask. Danzo will resign as advisor and as leader of Rod. You will place Konoha as the new director under my complete authority. Konoha will be examined for his loyalty. He will rekey his seals to remain active under himself. You will help him in this transition. You can warn him if he approaches you, but you will remain under constant observation. If you violate any of these stipulations, you will be immediately executed for treason. I understand. Danzo looked between the two and stopped. Karmara's surprise. He nodded once. I understand. I don't regret my actions, but I don't see anything wrong with preparing my own replacement. If this is what the Hokage demands, I will fulfill these conditions. It is clear that you were the best option for the position. He looked at the boy and he nodded. It seems that I am under your care, Konoha. The boy did not say anything. Yen gave a dry chuckle. And looked at Danzo. Your orders made Itachi turn rebel. I do not know when you will be forgiven for that. Danzo shrugged his shoulders and stood up. I have no interest in forgiveness, I only want the best for the village. Hiruzen turned to the two advisors as Konoha escorted Danzo out of the office. I think it's time the three of us have a talk about where exactly you fall in the village hierarchy. Reminder of who you should and shouldn't keep secrets from Sai stood up as the rest of the route gathered in the main bunker 9. Bunker 9 was created to be an emergency meeting point where the village's BB would be relocated in case of a successful invasion. Had not been used except 3 times in the last 5 years. He and Shin had just been training when another agent appeared next to their instructor. And their session ended abruptly. They quickly headed to the designated meeting place and saw that the entirety of Rod had been summoned. When everyone entered, he stepped out of the shadows next to him. There was a figure that was around Sai's age, with an unusual mask. Sai knew that the shinobi was not part of Rod, which made this whole situation unusual in herself. The day has come when things will change. Rod's leadership will be transferred to Konoha with immediate effect. 7 different Rod agents surrounded the two, separating Danzo from the people, with the 6 of them focused on observing the boy while checking Danzo by jutsu or other non-verbal indications of forced coercion. After a few seconds, the agent controlling Danzo stepped back and knelt in the direction of Konoha. Immediately all the Rod ninjas knelt and lowered their heads in the direction of Konoha. Sai did not know what would happen to from that moment on, but this was important. His new leader stepped forward, his mask covered in blood and dirt. There were tear tracks on the lower half that mixed the blood and dust, and then he nodded. Continue, stop all graduation exercises until further notice. I want a list of all current operatives and operations fired when they were fired. Sane couldn't help but think about how similar his new leader was to Konoha at Danzo. When they both gave orders, no protocols were established to transfer leadership to someone other than Danzo. The same Danzo. He probably didn't expect this to happen. He was cooperating, and that meant he thought it was the best option. Right now maybe everything was okay. You're not okay, Naruto. I think you need to tone down the training. It was just his position as Anbu commander and his position as the Naruto's older brother what made the stubborn boy stop his tastings and fall to the ground, maybe blessed with unholy stamina, but even you have limits. This wasn't the first time he had seen the boy train until his limbs were shaking, but he wasn't happy to see him again. The last time it happened was when Naruto got into a fight with the Kurama over something that had to do with the blind Uchiha. He was taking Itachi's disappearance very badly. He sat next to the 7-year-old boy and supported his hand on the boy's head. They sat in silence and just watched the clouds go by. I miss him. Kakashi didn't need empathy to hear the pain that dripped from Naruto's words. I know we will find him, and then we will find out why he did what he did. I'm sure he had a reason. Naruto, I want to talk to you about your hands. The boy tensed, but didn't move as Kakashi slowly took his hands and examined them. Naruto had jagged scars in the middle of his palms. Naruto, why are they still visible? Your healing should have taken care of them by now. The boy turned his head and avoided looking into his eyes. I asked him to give them to me. I wanted to remember that night. I will heal them when he returns. Kakashi wanted to tell him that Itachi could never return after what he had done to him. It was hopeless that things would go back to normal. Itachi's best hope was imprisonment. He knew that Naruto already felt what he wanted to say inside of him, and that was enough. Naruto curled up next to him and sobbed a little. I'll let you know if we find him. Something about him. If we find him, I'll let you talk to him. I won't keep you in the dark. He shouldn't let his emotions overwhelm his judgment, but it was worth it for the silent whispered thank you that left the boy's lips. The row team needs a new captain. Could you know that was his weasel position? And no, I'm strong enough for the missions. I couldn't save Uchiha. I need to get stronger. I want to learn jutsu now. Considering I'm known for copying over 1,000 jutsu, I'm sure I have some to teach you that. Are you interested? Aran, I agree. I think it's time to get back on the training path. Thanks, Nan. When do you think my training can start again? I'll talk to the Hokage. I'll see if you and the R team can get a mission too. What's up? I'm being reassigned. Naruto wiped his eyes and sobbed. I will become Captain Anbu. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. What, is there no squad that needs a captain besides Arcad is taking over? I only answer to you and Elok. You have no squad. What purpose will you serve? Naruto looked over other side. I can't really say. Oki wants it off the record. However, he needed a higher clearance. That's why rank is just a formality. Naruto, I don't like this. Are you sure you're not getting too into your head? I have to do this nice. And the boy gave him a big hug, and he couldn't help but smile softly. Take care of yourself, Naruto-kun. You still have a family that loves you here. I know waking up in a hospital room is an unpleasant experience. Waking up in a hospital room after not having expected to return to waking up is a completely different experience. Shisui heard the beep of a machine that monitors his vital signs and reflexively tensed. He could tell there was another person in the room moving a few feet away. Shisui didn't know where he was. All he knew was that the fire had to go out. It won't burn the trees. The voice spoke from his side, and Shisui stopped. That was a phrase that had been used in the last Shinobi War. It was used to identify medical ninjas with their wounded or disoriented comrades. He stood still for a while. A few seconds, almost waiting for a kunai to cut his throat before he felt the horrible sensation of a medical jutsu combing his chest. "Where am I? You are in an underground bunker hidden in the town. We had to keep you in the shadows during your recovery. We, your savior, and I, Agent Konoha, brought you in when you were on the verge of death and ordered me to save you." Shisui felt himself relax a little. Whoever these people were, they clearly weren't rot. Shisui realized that Agent Konoha was Anbu's designation under the command of Itachi. Agent Konoha? No, that's not an Anbu. Why not? I'm in the hospital. There were concerns that with the escalation of the situation you would be captured or kidnapped from a hospital room, or worse, imprisoned or killed for participation in the coup. Uchiha, you know, I thought that only the Hokage and the Konoha advisors kept me informed. In any case, the current situation is worse for you. After the Uchiha massacre, it was rumored in the upper levels that Itachi could have had help. Shisui felt the darkness tightening around him. He became unbearably cold and his voice sounded weakly from his suddenly weak body. Massacre of Uchiha. Then Itachi murdered more than 90% of the Uchiha clan. Yes, and if you suddenly appeared now, they would never let you leave the complex again. In the best of cases, no, your future is in another path. What are you talking about? My path? My clan is dead. My best friend is sub-executioner. I have given everything to the village. What more does it want? There was silence as the medical ninja slowly untangled a bandage on his arm and applied a new one. Before answering, Konoha saved your life. The village may have expelled you, but there is still work to do. Konoha-sama wants to save Itachi. I have a feeling you may have a similar wish. That's why. Shisui gritted his teeth and growled, I have no eyes now. I'm almost useless. You're not the one. First blind shinobi, and you won't be the last. You sacrificed a lot for peace, but you have more to give whether you know it or not. Your family is gone, and you can't return to town, but you still believe in the will of fire. It's not like that you have the chance to stand up. He'll take advantage of the opportunity to fight again. We'll see. I want to talk to Konoha. The doctor laughed. Of course, that's to be expected considering how he saved your life. He's eager to meet you. You know, Itachi. Apparently he spoke very highly of you and he's a little eager to find you. As someone who also believes in you that his senpai can be saved. Shisui felt his heart inadvertently ache for the boy. It seems that the Uchiha were not the only victims tonight. He knew how close Itachi was to his protege. They were practically family brothers in everything. But blood. Shisui felt guilty. Maybe he could have tried to use his left eye to stop the blow. He was so overcome by fear of Danzo that he had lost hope. He had given in to fear. He felt ashamed, getting hit and broken so much in spirit and in mind. Shisui has never felt so hopeless in his entire life. I want to fix what I have done. I want to make up for my mistakes. He will let me do that as much as you want and more, as long as you give him your loyalty. You will discover that it is impossible to lie to him. What if you have ulterior motives? You will find that any chance of redemption you may have had will be diminished, stripped of you. Shisui nodded and tried to sit up only to groan in pain. He heard the doctor laugh again and sit up. Don't be too anxious. Now your wounds will need to heal. Before that you can do something. When I will talk to Konoha, he will come to check on your condition soon. I will rest a little while. You will be busy in the next few weeks. Very well, thank you. Itachi looked towards the town of Konohagakure from the treetops in silent contemplation. He did not react when the figure Madara appeared at his side. His ancestor wore a spiral mask and a large robe, the red flash visible behind the eye of the mask, assured that he was a true Uchiha. You promised me the eradication of the Uchiha clan. However, I heard that some of them survived the night I was detained by the Konoha agent. My young disciple is quite skilled. Madara laughed, and Itachi wanted to attack him just because of how cruel he sounded. He made no move and instead looked towards his current ally. Well, regardless, a deal is a deal. Ichisen, you are still waiting. Join Akatsuki to protect you. Yes, with the village on my heels, I will need it. Very true, you will be loyal. However, I wonder. He said nothing as the deranged man chuckled and began jumping through the treetops. You will meet your new family in Megcure. You will arrive in 5 days. Pain will introduce you to your new companion, Juso Viwa. Itachi took one last look at the village before leaving in a hurry. It was not the hunter Ning that he was worried would catch him, but Naruto. If the boy caught up with him now and begged him to stay, he didn't know if he could refuse. Naruto sat in the Hokage's office in front of the Hokage Danzo next to him. He had missives that he had received from Rod agents and his own private source. So Yagak is looking to ally with Kirikumo. Danzo nodded yes. Sarutobi Inoki is making it increasingly clear that he is displeased with this treaty that you have forced Kumo to participate in. He has made no progress in tempting Kiri to his side. It seems that the Yagura boy is content to remain neutral while he orchestrates the genocide of the Keigen of his own nation. But there has been more communication between Inoki and well, that surely it can't be good. What steps are we taking in his effort? He looked at the unmasked Naruto. The root agents have discovered that one of the Iwajin Churikas has left the village and traveled through the land of the land. Sarutobi frowned. Your brow. Are you hinting at murder? Naruto-kun. No. Hokage-sama wished to try to convince him to defect. Naruto sat next to Yuzin at the training ground. If they had come here many times to train, it was the training ground where the salmon of the entire Village had also been trained really felt like his place. Naruto knew that if he was upset and he needed to talk to someone, if he just waited here, eventually his Jiji would walk down the street and sit next to him. The Hokage smiled when he caught Naruto's eye. "Are you ready to begin, Naruto-kun?" "Yes, Jiji." His guardian handed him a square of chakra paper, which Naruto took with reverence. He knew this was the next milestone in his career. Shinobi channel made chakra in him. There was a moment of silence while the teacher and the student waited to see the results. The two were surprised when the paper was torn in half loudly and the two halves were slowly soaked. Wow, two natures of chakra, wind and water, a perfect combination of your parents. Naruto-kun. Naruto smiled as he looked at the remains of the paper and nodded. Kurama told me that because of what the chakra did, it would be easy for me to use on any element, but he said that my affinities would still be the easiest for me to learn. Certainly so. That's where we'll start. Well, after I see your progress with the Genin Triad you have been practicing. Naruto gulped. Go well. I'm having problems with the Bunin. It wasn't often that Naruto was having trouble with something, and he didn't like to admit that he couldn't do something. He was very grateful that Sarutobi just raised an eyebrow and said, "Show me." Naruto closed his eyes and concentrated. He made the hand seals and channeled the chakra, and 75 clones that looked half dead appeared around him. He blushed when the Hokage laughed and ruffled his hair. "I think he might know what the problem is, Naruto-kun. You simply have too much chakra and your control is not yet at the level of a box that can be easily remedied." "Well, I was planning to teach you this technique anyway, but I think it's better to do it now before moving on to the elemental jutsu." "Oh, what technique, sensei?" "It's called Kajbunin, the shadow clone technique." Naruto saw how a clone appeared next to Hiruzen in a small cloud of smoke. It takes a large amount of chakra to make. One is divided between the user and the clone. The most impressive part of the jutsu is that all the memories the clone experiences are sent back to the caster after its destruction. Naruto felt his eyes widen. At that, the implications were amazing. If he could make 2 clones, he could have 3 days of moving on to the elemental jutsu. "Oh, what technique, sensei?" "It's called Kajbunin, the shadow clone technique." Naruto saw how a clone appeared next to Hiruzen in a small cloud of smoke. It takes a large amount of chakra to make. One is divided between the user and the clone. The most impressive part of the jutsu is that all the memories the clone experiences are sent back to the caster after its destruction. Naruto felt his eyes widen. At that, the implications were amazing. If he could make 2 clones, he could have 3 days of study in one that would greatly improve his training. "That's amazing, Jiji. Please, how do I do it? What are the seals?" The Hokage gave him another smile. Naruto knew that deep down the Sundaime was a teacher, an academic at heart. Naruto didn't mind pleasing him with his enthusiasm for learning. He had the opportunity to learn from the best and he always made sure not to waste it. "It's pretty simple, Naruto-kun. Just a ram seal like that." Naruto's hand entered in the position and channeled chakra. "How many do you think I can do, Jiji?" "Probably a couple." Naruto is very tiring. He was interrupted when the clearing was covered with a monumental cloud of smoke. Naruto blinked in confusion as the smoke began to dissipate. "Jiji, it didn't make much smoke when you did it. I think that I did something wrong." Naruto turned and realized that his teacher was gaping around him without words he didn't understand until he felt them seeing themselves in a mirror for the first time. It was disconcerting to see your reflection how the world sees you. It is an unusual phenomenon, feeling the emotions of yourself perfectly copied and surrounding you, emanating from over 300 replicas, is amazing. Naruto-kun, we need to talk about your future training regimen. I have decided that it may need to be sped up." Sai was surprised when he was called to meet with his new leader Konoha C. He had taken over the headquarters with a perfect transition. He had investigated all the agents in 3 days and had removed 5 of them. Those 5, surprisingly, had not been neutralized but rather reintegrated into the village as civilians. An interesting change entered the leader's room. And he saw Konoha's true face for the first time. The boy seemed to be as old as Sai himself. It was quite surprising. Most children are not that independent or mature unless they were in rot. Sai stepped forward and greeted calmly. "What is it? Your name is Sai?" Konoha nodded and looked at him with interest. "I have a long-term mission for you. I want you to join the Shinobi Academy and observe the heirs of the clan, mainly a certain Sasuke Uchiha." Sai bowed his head when he received his orders and he knelt. "Let your will be done, leader Sama." Sai stood up and walked out. He had to find out how to make friends with children. He didn't want to disappoint his leader Danzo or not. It wouldn't reflect well if a rot agent failed in his mission. He went to the dining room and found his brother eating with pleasure. Shin had always been more expressive than Sai. His brother looked up in the middle of a bite and he had the decency to swallow before starting to speak. "Hey, what was the meeting about?" "I've been assigned a new long-term mission. I will join the Shinobi Academy and observe the clan heirs. I will be stuck with children. It might be good for you, Sai. You are a child." He looked at his brother and did not notice that he did not flinch at the display of emotion. The emotional conditioning had been erased from his training. However, he saw his brother smiling at him and realized he was still Expressing his displeasure, his face slipped back to the neutral state he had been trained to assume, and then his brother chose to frown. Naruto frowned as he watched the young ninja leave his new office and sighed. The office was quite empty. It wasn't surprising. But he had taken some photos that the Sundaime had given him and put them on his desk. The photo of Itachi eating at Ichiraku was there. Safe in his top drawer. Wouldn't it be good to openly appreciate a missing ninja of Rango? That one also still bothered him to look at Naruto, stood up and opened a secret door behind his chair. Danzo had turned his paranoia into a weapon and had dakinas of secret passages that only he knew about previously. It had been easy enough for Naruto to realize his existence one-on-one with someone would inevitably reveal his darkest secrets. He slowly descended the spiral staircase and past a few closed doors. He was heading towards one of his own darkest secrets. At this moment he approached the door and channeled his chakra into the handle to release the lock seal. It glowed green and pushed it open. When the lock made a slight click, Naruto was convinced that there was something genetic about the seals, and the seals of Uzumaki Kurama could not highlight any genom that indicated such a relationship, but Naruto only needed to think of the few dozen seals he had mastered to be sure of his belief. The art of sealing was done in levels or stages, and in addition, there were levels for each individual seal. Masters got the most bang for his buck, fine-tuning existing seals, making them more reliable, efficient and lethal. It was very rare for completely new seals to come out in mass production. It would usually take a few generations of a prototype seal to be perfected by the creator or his students before it began to be used by the village, and from there stolen by spies and fallen shinobi. Naruto had no time for such traditions. He had designed his own locking seal that was connected to the chakra signatures and used them everywhere where no one else. Maba was sure that Danzo knew he now had his own locks, but he would probably keep them to himself. Just because he was no longer leading Rod didn't mean he wasn't a strong player in the town's political theater game. Since his retirement, Danzo had been much more active talking to the different clans. It would take time to figure out what he was doing, but Naruto was determined not to be outdone by the cunning warmonger. He opened the door and entered Kabuto's newest laboratory. Kabuto didn't look up from his tubes rehearsal. Naruto didn't expect him to do it. The experiments Danzo had been performing were disgusting, but they fascinated Naruto's friend anyway. The young doctor hadn't left the chamber for more than an hour a day. I can't say I'm glad to be back in the middle of Rod, but this is just too good to let go to waste. He's been I know Kabuto-kun. Naruto walked over and sat at the desk. I read all the research before giving it to you. I didn't understand most of it, and what I did know I liked it. I don't know if it's a good idea to continue with these experiments. Naruto could feel Kabuto's reluctance to agree. Kabuto was of a morally ambiguous nature. He also felt his apprehension to raise his concerns. You can disagree, Kabuto-kun. I won't be angry. Kabuto, he smiled and turned to look at him. Naruto-kun, your enemies won't play nice. We shouldn't either. These experiments are not pleasant, but there are ways to carry them out in a much more humane and compassionate way. They could mean success. You need to use all the tools in your arsenal if you want to have the best chance of success. I know you're right. I just don't like it very much. However, I'll trust your judgment for now. Thank you for coming here. I know you're worried that Danzo might attack us. You're very brave. Kabuto laughed and Naruto pouted. But I knew there was nothing I could do to stop him. Kabuto would still have fun if Naruto ever tried to comfort him or something like that. What's our next move, Naruto-kun? We have broken our command. Suddenly a lot more routes are open to us. Don't get excited. I don't trust anyone here or Danzo too much. If anyone could find a way to trick my empathy, it would be him. I have agents gathering as much information on the Jinchuriki as they can, and I convinced the Sundaime to let me send agents to convince Rossi the Jinchuriki of the 4 lines of deserting. But what a good thing I didn't tell him that I myself would go out to talk to Rossi. Kabuto paused in his writing and turned to Naruto with a serious face. That's a terrible idea. If something were to happen to you, I know, but I have to doing it. He wouldn't trust anyone else. This is something I have to do myself. Kabuto frowned and Naruto grimaced as he got angry. Kabuto's anger was like a snake coiled tight and poisonous. Kabuto was a dangerous man, and he was almost as emotional as an Uchiha. It just took more than most for him to lose his cool. Who are you taking with you? Rude agents? Yes, but I'm not going like Konoha. Kabuto blinked, and his surprise dulled his going a little. Naruto sighed a little. He hated bothering those he that was close. Are you going to go like Naruto Uzumaki? How is that going to work? Naruto grimaced and looked away as he idly traced a seal inside your manga. Well, they'll have the Hyuning exams tomorrow, and I'm going to sneak in and try them. Then they'll have to make me a jounin. Kabuto groaned, and Naruto grimaced again. The only thing worse than Kabuto's anger was his anxiety, and he was rising sharply. Right now you haven't given me much time. Naruto-kun, make some shadow clones. We're going to have a few hours of studying before you jump into something you're not prepared for. Shika-kun. Nara watched as the nominees for the Hing exam, they sat one by one. The Jounin exam was a promotion option for Chunin to Kibetsu-hin, who felt they were ready for advancement but had not been promoted on their Hokage's own initiative. It was primarily for the use of those who needed to prove their capacity, such as the Jounin exam was much more secretive than the ostentatious and public tuning exams as such. It also had an incredibly smaller pool of examinees, there were only about a dozen applicants, but the nature of the exam divided them into cells of 4. The group I was supervising contained Chunin Sanko Mitarashi Karina and Yui Sato and Cab to Kabetsu Jounin AHE. The Jounin exams only come once every 2 years, and for good reason. They were incredibly grueling, and if offered every 6 months, they could be more harmful, rather than beneficial to the village's strength. Followed the same formula for the Chunin exams, but was much less lenient. There was a 300-question exam for the first part of the Jounin exam. Each examinee received a specialized packet the day before the exam that had 70 out of the 300 questions. Each examinee was given different questions in the time leading up to the exam. They were expected to decipher the answers that had been provided to them, and they would have to use their skills to compile the other answers, of course. This left 20 questions that had not been provided to no examinee, and to pass the exam you could only fail 10 questions. Followed the same formula for the Chunin exams, but it was much less lenient. There was a 300-question exam for the first part of the Hin exam. Each examinee received a specialized package the day before to the exam, which had 70 questions out of 300. Each examinee was given different questions in the time leading up to the exam. They were expected to decipher the answers that had been provided to them, and they would have to use their skills to compile the other answers, of course. This left 20 questions that had not been provided to any examinee, and to pass the exam, you could only fail 10 questions. Followed the same formula for the Chunin exams, but it was much less lenient. There was a 300-question exam for the first part of the Jounin exam. Each examinee received a specialized package the day before the exam, which had 70 questions out of the 300. Each examinee was given different questions in the time leading up to the exam. They were expected to decipher the answers that had been provided to them, and would have to use their skills to compile the other answers, of course. This left 20 questions that had not been provided to any examinee, and to pass the exam you could only fail 10 questions. Each examinee received a specialized packet the day before the exam that had 70 questions out of the 300. Each examinee was given different questions in the time before. They were expected to decipher the answers that had been provided to them, and they would have to use their skills to compile the other answers, of course. This left 20 questions that had not been provided to any examinee, and to pass the exam, they could only fail 10 questions. Each examinee received a specialized packet the day before the exam, which had 70 questions out of the 300. Each examinee was given different questions in the time leading up to the exam. They were expected to decipher the answers that had been provided to them, and would have to use their skills to compile the other answers, of course. This left 20 questions that had not been provided to any examinee, and to pass the exam, you could only fail 10 questions. The first exam only lasted an hour. Shikaku thought this was the easiest test of all, but many Joun, they blamed this part of the exam for why it took them so long to be promoted.